Mara Quinn stood in Nico Valloni's penthouse office with blood on her hands and a confession that could destroy them both. 48 hours earlier, she'd been a broke woman begging for a job. Now she was the only witness to execution, the accidental keeper of a $10 million secret, and the one person standing between New York's most dangerous man and the war that would burn the city to ash. This is the story of how a desperate assistant became the woman who saved a monster's soul, and how love grew in the darkest corners of power. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. Well, the subway doors hissed shut behind Mara Quinn at exactly 9:23 a.m., and she knew, with the sick certainty of someone whose life had become a series of catastrophic dominoes, that she was already finished. 23 minutes late, to an interview at Vallone Holdings. She bolted up the station steps 2 at a time, her discount heels clicking against concrete, her outdated blazer catching on the handrail. Above her, Manhattan's glass towers sliced into a November sky the color of steel, indifferent and cold. The wind bit through her clothes, and somewhere in the scramble she felt the strap of her purse snap, sending her phone skittering across the sidewalk. No, no, no! She lunged for it, nearly colliding with a businessman who cursed and sidestepped her like she was debris. The screen was cracked, but it still worked. No messages. No callbacks. No mercy. She ran. The lobby of the Vallone Holdings Tower was all black marble and hushed money, the kind of place where even the air felt expensive. The security guard looked her up and down with unconcealed judgment as she gasped out her name, and the receptionist, a woman whose manicure probably cost more than Mara's rent, handed her a visitor badge with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. 15th floor, you're expected. Expected. That was a joke. Mara's resume was a patchwork of survival. 3 part-time jobs, a half-finished degree she couldn't afford to complete, and a 6-month gap she couldn't explain without talking about her mother's first cancer scare and the ex-boyfriend who'd promised forever and delivered bankruptcy. She'd applied to 47 positions in 2 weeks. Vallone Holdings was the only one that called back. She didn't know why. She didn't care. She just needed the job. The elevator ride was 13 floors of silent panic. She tried to fix her hair in the brushed steel reflection, but it was hopeless. Dark curls escaping their clip, eyes too wide, a coffee stain on her collar she'd tried and failed to scrub out that morning. She looked exactly like what she was, broke, desperate, and out of options. The doors opened onto a floor that smelled like leather and old money. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city like a conquest, and the few people she saw moved with the quiet efficiency of those who understood power. A young man in an immaculate suit glanced at her, then away, dismissing her in a heartbeat. "Miss Quinn?" The voice came from a woman in her 50s, impeccably dressed, her expression professionally neutral. "This way." Mara followed her down a hall lined with abstract art that probably cost more than her mother's surgery, past offices where men and women spoke in low tones into phones, their words clipped and final. Everything here was a test, and she was failing before she'd even begun. They stopped at a heavy wooden door. "Mr. Vallone will see you now." The woman opened the door and stepped aside, and Mara walked into the room where her life would either end or begin. Nico Vallone didn't look up. He sat behind a desk the size of a small car, his attention fixed on a document he was annotating with sharp, precise strokes of a pen. The office was massive, minimalist, and cold. No photographs, no personal touches, just glass and steel and the kind of wealth that didn't need to prove itself. The man himself was younger than she'd expected, maybe mid-30s, dark-haired and sharp-featured, wearing a suit that looked like it cost more than her car had before it died. He didn't acknowledge her, didn't gesture for her to sit, just kept reading, each second of silence another stone added to the weight crushing her chest. Mara stood there, hands clenched, heart hammering, until she couldn't take it anymore. "I'm late," she said. "I'm 23 minutes late, my resume is a mess, and I look like I got dressed in the dark. So if you're going to fire me before you hire me, just do it now and save us both the time." The pen stopped moving. Slowly, Nico Vallone raised his eyes to meet hers, and Mara felt the full weight of his attention like a physical force. His eyes were dark, assessing, and utterly devoid of warmth. This was a man who built empires and buried enemies, and she had just walked into his office and challenged him. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he set down his pen with deliberate care. Sit. It wasn't a request. Mara sat. Nico leaned back in his chair, studying her with the cold precision of someone evaluating a piece of machinery. You're 23 minutes late to an interview that could change your life. Explain. Mara's first instinct was to lie, to offer some polished excuse about traffic or train delays. But something about the way he looked at her, like he could see straight through pretense into the raw, ugly truth beneath, made her choose honesty instead. My mother has cancer, she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Stage 3. Her surgery is in 48 hours, and I don't have the money to pay for it. My ex-boyfriend emptied my savings account 6 months ago and disappeared, and I've been working 3 part-time jobs trying to catch up, but I can't. I'm drowning. The subway was delayed, my phone died, and I ran 12 blocks to get here because this is the only real interview I've had in 2 months, and I can't afford to lose it. So yes, I'm late. I'm a disaster. But I'm here, and I'll work harder than anyone you've ever hired if you give me the chance. The silence that followed felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. Nico's expression didn't change. Why should I believe you? Because I have nothing left to lose, Mara said. And people with nothing left don't waste time on lies. Something flickered in his eyes. Not sympathy, exactly, but something sharper. Recognition, maybe. Or calculation. He reached for a folder on his desk, flipped it open, and scanned the contents with the same ruthless efficiency he'd applied to everything else. Her resume, she realized. Her entire life reduced to bullet points and employment gaps. You have no executive assistant experience, he said. No? Your degree is unfinished. Yes. Your last employer gave you a reference that described you as enthusiastic but unfocused. Mara winced. I was working 2 other jobs at the time. I was exhausted. And yet you're asking me to trust you with my schedule, my correspondence, and my business operations. He closed the folder. Why would I take that risk? Because I won't let you down, Mara said. The words came out fiercer than she'd intended, raw and unpolished. I can't afford to. You want someone who will show up early, stay late, and fight like hell to get things right? I'm that person. I've been that person my whole life. I just need someone to give me a shot. Nico regarded her for another long moment, and Mara felt herself being weighed, measured, and judged by standards she couldn't see. Finally, he leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. I don't tolerate weakness, he said, his voice low and cold. I don't tolerate mistakes, excuses, or second chances. If I hire you, you will work harder than you've ever worked in your life. You will be available when I need you, no matter the hour. You will learn fast, adapt faster, and if you fail, even once, you're gone. No warnings, no explanations. Understood? Mara's throat was dry, but she nodded. Understood. You'll start with a trial period, 2 weeks. Survive that, and we'll discuss terms. He slid a business card across the desk. Be here tomorrow morning at 7. Not 7:01. 7. Mara picked up the card with shaking hands. Thank you. I won't. Don't thank me, Nico interrupted. Prove you're worth the risk, or disappear. She stood, her legs unsteady, and turned toward the door. She was halfway there when his voice stopped her. Miss Quinn. She looked back. Nico's expression was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes, a flicker of something almost human beneath the ice. Your mother's surgery. What hospital? Mara blinked, confused. St. Vincent's. Why? No reason. He picked up his pen again, returning his attention to the document in front of him. 7 a.m. Don't be late. Mara left the office in a daze, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. She didn't understand what had just happened, didn't know why Nico Vallone, a man whose reputation preceded him like a storm front, had given her a chance when he could have dismissed her in seconds. But as the elevator doors closed and the city spread out below her, she made herself a promise. She would survive this, whatever it took. She had 48 hours to figure out how. The next morning, Mara arrived at Valloni Holdings at 6:59 a.m. The lobby was empty except for the security guard, who looked surprised to see her. The receptionist wasn't at her desk yet. The elevator was silent as it carried her to the 15th floor, and when the doors opened, the office was dark except for a single light coming from the far end of the hall. Nico's office. Mara walked toward it, her footsteps muffled by thick carpet, and found the door ajar. Inside, Nico sat at his desk exactly as he had the day before, surrounded by papers and screens, working with the focused intensity of someone who didn't sleep. He glanced up as she entered. "You're early." "You said 7. I wasn't taking any chances." The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. "Smart." He gestured to a smaller desk positioned near the windows. "That's yours. Computer's already set up. Password is on a sticky note in the top drawer. Coffee machine is in the break room, 2 doors down. I take mine black, no sugar. Learn the phone system, familiarize yourself with my calendar, and don't touch anything on my desk without asking first." Mara nodded, setting her bag down carefully. "Anything else?" "Yes." Nico leaned back in his chair, his dark eyes fixed on her. "People are going to test you. They'll push, they'll question, they'll try to find your breaking point. Some of them work for me. Some of them want to destroy me. Your job is to figure out which is which and never ever let them see you sweat. Understood?" "Good." He turned back to his work, dismissing her. "Get started." The first 3 hours were a baptism by fire. The phone rang constantly. Clients, partners, lawyers, people whose voices carried the weight of money and threat in equal measure. Mara fumbled through the first few calls, transferring 2 people to the wrong extensions and accidentally hanging up on a man who called back swearing. But she learned fast, scribbling notes in a system only she understood, cross-referencing names with the contacts database, and slowly building a mental map of Nico's world. It was a world built on precision and fear. At 10 a.m., a man in his 40s appeared at her desk without introduction. He was broad-shouldered and granite-faced, with the kind of stillness that suggested violence held on a leash. "You're the new girl," he said. It wasn't a question. "Mara Quinn." She offered her hand. He didn't take it. "Silas Rourke, I handle security and operations." He studied her with the same cold assessment Nico had used, and Mara had the distinct impression she was being measured for a coffin. "How long do you think you'll last?" "As long as it takes." Wrong answer. Silas leaned closer, his voice dropping to a murmur that didn't carry past her desk. "You're in over your head, sweetheart. One mistake, one betrayal, one moment of weakness, and I'll handle you personally. Understand?" Mara's pulse spiked, but she kept her voice steady. "I'm not here to betray anyone. I'm here to work." "Everyone says that." Silas straightened, his expression unreadable. "Let's see if you mean it." He walked away without another word, and Mara realized her hands were shaking. By noon, she'd routed 37 calls, scheduled 4 meetings, and discovered that Nico's calendar was a minefield of overlapping commitments and conflicting priorities. She'd also learned that the office ran on a current of unspoken tension. Assistants who wouldn't meet her eyes, executives who spoke in codes she didn't understand, and a pervasive sense that everyone was watching everyone else. This wasn't just a company, it was a chessboard, and she was a pawn who didn't know the rules. At 1 p.m., a delivery arrived. A large envelope marked confidential with instructions to have Nico sign for it immediately. Mara brought it to his office, knocked once, and entered when he gestured her in. "Delivery," she said, holding out the envelope. "Needs your signature." Nico took it, examined the seal, and then handed her a pen. "Sign for me." Mara hesitated. "You want me to forge your signature?" "I want you to sign as my authorized representative. There's a difference." He tapped the designated line. "Here." She signed, her handwriting awkward next to the printed formality of the document, and handed the envelope back. Nico opened it, scanned the contents, and then went very still. "What is it?" Mara asked before she could stop herself. Nico's eyes lifted to hers, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw something like surprise in his expression. "You just triggered a contract clause I didn't know existed." "What? How?" This document required a signature from someone with executive authority within 24 hours of delivery. If I'd signed it myself, it would have locked us into a 10-year distribution agreement with penalty clauses that would have cost us $15 million. But because you signed as an authorized assistant, not an executive, the clause is void. The contract defaults to our original terms. Mara stared at him. I saved you $15 million? By accident? By instinct. Nico set the document down carefully, his gaze sharp and assessing. Or luck. Either way, you just made yourself valuable. I didn't even know what I was doing. That, Nico said slowly, is what makes it interesting. The rest of the day passed in a blur of tasks and tests, each one slightly harder than the last. Mara answered phones, managed schedules, fielded questions she barely understood, and somehow, through sheer stubbornness and a refusal to quit, kept up. By the time the office began to empty at 7 p.m., she was exhausted, wired, and strangely exhilarated. Nico appeared at her desk as she was shutting down her computer. You survived day one, he said. Barely. That's more than most people manage. He studied her for a moment, and Mara had the unsettling sense that he was recalculating something. Tomorrow, same time. Don't get comfortable. I won't. He turned to leave, then paused. Your mother's surgery. How did it go? Mara froze. It's tomorrow. Why? No reason. Nico walked back toward his office without another word, and Mara stood there, confused and unnerved. That night, she lay awake in her cramped apartment, staring at the ceiling and replaying the day in her mind. She didn't understand Nico Vallone, didn't understand why he'd hired her, why he seemed to be testing her constantly, or why he'd asked about her mother. But she knew, with bone-deep certainty, that she'd stepped into something far more dangerous than a job. The call came at 11 p.m. Mara jolted awake, fumbling for her phone, her heart already racing. The number was unfamiliar, but she answered anyway, her voice thick with sleep. Hello? Miss Quinn, it's Dr. Reza from St. Vincent's. Her blood turned to ice. Is my mom okay? She's fine. Better than fine, actually. I'm calling because there's been a development with her surgery bill. Mara sat up, clutching the phone. What kind of development? It's been paid, in full. The payment came through an hour ago. Anonymous donor, cashier's check. I wanted to let you know before we proceeded with the surgery tomorrow morning. The world tilted. Paid? All of it? Every cent, including post-op care and medications. Whoever did this wanted to make sure she'd be taken care of. Mara's hands were shaking so hard she nearly dropped the phone. Thank you. Thank you. She ended the call and sat in the dark, her mind reeling. Anonymous donor. Cashier's check. Paid in full. Nico Vallone had asked about her mother's surgery twice. And now, less than 24 hours after she'd mentioned it, the bill was paid. It could have been a coincidence. It could have been luck. But Mara didn't believe in coincidences anymore. She thought about the man who'd hired her despite every reason not to. The man who tested her, pushed her, and somehow saw something in her that no one else had. The man whose world was built on power and secrets and debts that could never be repaid. And she realized, with a clarity that felt like stepping off a ledge, that she'd just been bought. Not with threats. Not with force. With kindness. The next morning, Mara arrived at Vallone Holdings at 6:55 a.m. and went straight to Nico's office. He was already there, of course, working in the pre-dawn quiet. He looked up as she entered, his expression unreadable. You're early again, he said. I need to ask you something. Nico set down his pen, giving her his full attention. Go ahead. Did you pay for my mother's surgery? Silence. Nico leaned back in his chair, his dark eyes steady on hers. Would it matter if I did? Yes. Why? Because I need to know what you want from me in return. A faint smile touched his lips, cold, sharp, and entirely without humor. I want you to work. That's all. Your mother needed help. I provided it. Consider it an investment in your focus. An investment, Mara repeated slowly. In me. In your potential. Nico's gaze didn't waver. You're smart, Ms. Quinn. Smarter than you give yourself credit for. But you're also desperate, which makes you vulnerable. I removed one vulnerability. Now you can concentrate on the job without that weight dragging you down. That benefits both of us. Mara's chest felt tight. I can't repay you. Not in money. I don't want your money. Nico stood, moving around the desk with the predatory grace of someone who owned every space he entered. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. I want your loyalty, your discretion, your absolute commitment to this company and everything it represents. Can you give me that? Mara thought about her mother, waking up this morning without the crushing weight of medical debt. She thought about the surgery that would save her life, paid for by a man who barely knew her. She thought about the job she couldn't afford to lose and the dangerous, complicated man standing in front of her. Yes, she said. I can. Good. Nico stepped back, the moment broken. Then we understand each other. Get back to work. Mara turned to leave, but his voice stopped her at the door. Miss Quinn. She looked back. Welcome to Valone Holdings, the real version. The rest of the week unfolded like a masterclass in controlled chaos. Mara learned the rhythms of the office, who to trust, who to avoid, and who was always watching. She learned that Silas Rourke ran security with an iron fist and zero tolerance for deviation. She learned that the legal team spoke in codes and worked late into the night on contracts that never seemed to involve anything legal. She learned that Nico's meetings often took place behind closed doors, and that people emerged from them looking pale and shaken. She learned to keep her mouth shut and her eyes open. On Thursday, a woman in a designer suit appeared at Mara's desk without warning. She was stunning, blonde, poised, and radiating the kind of confidence that came from old money and older power. You must be the new assistant, the woman said, her smile sharp enough to cut. I'm Celeste Carrington. Nico and I are close. Mara recognized the name from the calendar. Celeste had a standing dinner reservation with Nico every other Friday. Nice to meet you. I'm sure. Celeste's eyes swept over Mara's off-the-rack blouse and drugstore makeup with obvious disdain. Tell Nico I stopped by. And do try to look a bit more professional. First impressions matter in this industry. She left in a cloud of expensive perfume, and Mara sat there, cheeks burning, until Silas appeared at her desk. Don't let her get to you, he said gruffly. Celeste thinks she owns Nico. She doesn't. What does she want? What everyone wants, power, money, a ring. Silas's expression hardened. She won't get it. Nico doesn't marry. He doesn't do relationships. He does transactions. Mara thought about the surgery bill and wondered what kind of transaction she'd just entered into. By Friday afternoon, she'd handled 63 calls, rescheduled 2 board meetings, and accidentally uncovered a discrepancy in the quarterly financials that turned out to be a billing error worth $40,000. Nico had looked at her with something that might have been approval and told her to keep digging. She was exhausted, exhilarated, and increasingly certain that she'd stepped into a world where the rules didn't apply. At 8 p.m., long after most of the office had cleared out, Mara was still at her desk, cross-referencing expense reports and trying to make sense of a budget that seemed designed to be incomprehensible. The office was dark, except for the glow of her computer screen and the faint light coming from Nico's office down the hall. She should have gone home, should have called her mother, checked on the recovery, gotten some sleep. But something nagged at her, a pattern in the numbers she couldn't quite name, a sense that there was something hidden just beneath the surface. She pulled up another file, then another, following the thread of inconsistencies like breadcrumbs through a forest she didn't understand. And then she saw it, a series of transfers buried deep in the records, all flowing to the same offshore account, small enough to avoid scrutiny, regular enough to be intentional, and tied to a name she recognized from the executive roster, Graham Kessler, CFO. Mara's pulse spiked. This was embezzlement, or money laundering, or something worse. She should have stopped there, should have brought it to Nico in the morning, followed protocol, stayed in her lane. But the same instinct that had made her sign that contract, the same reckless courage that had walked her into Nico's office 23 minutes late and told him the truth, that instinct pushed her forward. She grabbed her phone, took photos of the records, and then did something monumentally stupid. She went looking for proof. Graham Kessler's office was 2 floors up, in the executive wing where assistants didn't belong. Mara took the stairs, her heart pounding, and slipped into the darkened hallway like a thief. The door to Graham's office was locked, but the admin desk outside had a key drawer that opened with a simple letter opener. She was inside in 30 seconds, the door clicking shut behind her. The office was pristine. Glass desk, leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Mara moved quickly, rifling through drawers, searching filing cabinets, looking for anything that would confirm what she'd found. And then she heard voices. Low. Angry. Coming from the hall. Mara's blood turned to ice. She looked around wildly, searching for somewhere to hide, but the office was too open, too exposed. The voices were getting closer. 2 men, their words muffled but unmistakable. One of them was Graham Kessler. The other was Nico Vallone. Mara dove behind the desk just as the door opened, her heart slamming against her ribs. Through the gap beneath the desk, she could see 2 pairs of shoes, Graham's polished loafers and Nico's black dress shoes. "You're making a mistake," Graham said, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "I've been loyal. I've done everything you asked." "Loyalty isn't the issue." Nico's voice was cold, calm, and utterly devoid of mercy. "Competence is. You've been skimming funds and funneling them to people who want me dead. That's not a mistake. That's treason." "I don't know what you're talking about." The sound of a gun cocking cut through the air like a blade. Mara clamped a hand over her mouth to keep from gasping, her entire body shaking. She couldn't see what was happening, but she could hear everything. The ragged edge of Graham's breathing, the terrible silence that followed, and then Nico's voice, soft and lethal. "I'll ask you one more time. Who are you working for?" "I can't. If I tell you, they'll kill me. And if you don't, I will." A long pause. Then Graham broke. "Benedetti. Damien Benedetti. He offered me twice what you were paying, said you were finished, that the old guard was taking back the city. I thought I was choosing the winning side." Nico's laugh was low and humorless. "You chose poorly. Please. I have a family. I'll disappear. I'll give back everything. You're right. You will disappear." The gunshot was deafening. Mara bit down on her hand hard enough to draw blood, tears streaming down her face as Graham's body hit the floor with a heavy, final thud. She heard Nico make a call, his voice clipped and businesslike. "Silas? Graham's office. Clean it up." "Copy that." Footsteps. The door opening, closing, silence. Mara stayed frozen behind the desk, her entire body trembling, her mind screaming at her to run, to hide, to do anything but stay in this room where a man had just been executed. But she couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think past the roaring in her ears and the terrible knowledge of what she'd just witnessed. She didn't know how long she stayed there. Minutes, hours, an eternity compressed into heartbeats. But eventually, she heard the door open again, and Silas's voice low and efficient. "Jesus, you didn't have to do it here." "He chose the location." Nico sounded tired. "Get him out. Make it look like he ran. Offshore accounts, fake trail, the usual. And if anyone asks questions, they won't. No one liked him anyway." Footsteps again, movement, the sound of something heavy being dragged. And then, cutting through it all, Silas's voice, sharp with alarm. "Boss, we've got a problem." "What?" "The desk. There's someone behind it." Mara's heart stopped. She heard Nico cross the room in 3 strides. And then he was there, staring down at her with an expression she couldn't read. Surprise, anger, and something darker. "Miss Quinn," he said quietly. "You have the worst timing." Mara couldn't feel her legs, couldn't feel anything except the cold weight of Nico's stare and the certainty that she was about to die in an executive office 2 floors above where she was supposed to be. Silas had his gun out, aimed directly at her head. "Talk fast, sweetheart. What are you doing here?" Her voice came out as a whisper. "I found discrepancies. In the financials, transfers to offshore accounts tied to Graham's name. I came looking for proof." Nico's jaw tightened. "So you broke into his office?" I didn't think." "That's obvious." He reached down, grabbed her arm, and hauled her to her feet with enough force that she stumbled. His grip was iron, his eyes blazing with controlled fury. "How much did you see?" Mara's throat closed. She couldn't lie. Not with Graham's blood seeping into the carpet 3 feet away. Not with Silas's gun still trained on her. Everything. The silence that followed felt like the moment before an avalanche. Silas swore under his breath. "She's a liability. Let me handle this." "No." Nico's voice cracked like a whip. His grip on Mara's arm tightened, and he pulled her toward the door, away from Graham's body, away from the spreading pool of darkness on the pristine floor. "We're leaving. Now." "Boss, you can't just clean this up. I'll deal with her." Mara's legs barely worked as Nico dragged her down the hallway, past darkened offices, into a stairwell she'd never seen before. The door slammed shut behind them, and the sound echoed like a gunshot. She flinched, and Nico's hand shifted from her arm to her wrist, his fingers finding her racing pulse. "Breathe," he said, his voice low and hard, "before you pass out." "You killed him." The words tumbled out trembling and raw. "You shot him in the head and called someone to clean it up like it was nothing. It wasn't nothing. It was necessary." Nico started down the stairs, pulling her with him. "Graham Kessler was stealing from me and feeding information to my enemies. He chose his fate the moment he took their money. That doesn't give you the right to execute him." Nico stopped so abruptly she nearly crashed into his back. He turned, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. "Rights don't exist in my world, Ms. Quinn. Only power and consequences." Graham understood that. "The question is, do you?" Mara's hands were shaking so badly she had to clench them into fists. "I understand that I just watched you commit murder. Then you understand why you can't leave." Nico resumed walking, his pace relentless. "You're in it now, whether you want to be or not." They emerged in an underground parking garage Mara hadn't known existed. Nico led her to a black sedan with tinted windows, opened the passenger door, and waited. When she didn't move, he leaned closer, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "Get in the car, Mara, or Silas gets his way." She got in the car. The drive was silent and suffocating. Nico navigated through streets she didn't recognize, away from Manhattan's bright core into quieter neighborhoods where brownstones huddled against the November cold. He pulled into an underground garage beneath a building that looked residential but felt like a fortress, and led her to an elevator that required a keycard and thumbprint to operate. "Where are we?" Mara asked, her voice barely audible. "Somewhere safe." The elevator doors opened directly into a penthouse apartment, all dark wood, leather furniture, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Nico gestured toward a leather sofa. "Sit." Mara sat because her legs gave out. She watched, numb, as Nico poured 2 glasses of whiskey and set one in front of her. "Drink." "I don't." It wasn't a suggestion. She picked up the glass with trembling hands and took a sip. The whiskey burned going down, sharp and grounding. Nico sat across from her, his own glass untouched, and studied her with the intensity of someone solving a complex equation. "You have 2 choices," he said finally. "The first is to walk away. I'll have Silas escort you home, and by morning you'll have a generous severance package and a non-disclosure agreement that will legally bind you to silence for the rest of your life. You'll never work in this city again, but you'll be alive and free." Mara's chest tightened. "And the second choice? You stay. You work for me knowing exactly what that means. You accept that the world you've entered isn't built on laws or morality, but on power, loyalty, and survival. You understand that the people I deal with are dangerous, that the business we conduct exists in shadows, and that if you betray me, if you tell anyone what you saw tonight, you won't live long enough to regret it. That's not a choice. That's a threat. It's reality." Nico leaned forward, his dark eyes locked on hers. "I didn't ask for you to stumble into Graham's office. I didn't want you to see what happened, but you did, and now we're both living with the consequences. So tell me, Mara Quinn, what are you going to do?" Mara's mind raced through possibilities, each one worse than the last. If she walked away, she'd spend the rest of her life looking over her shoulder, wondering if Nico would decide she was too much of a risk. If she stayed, she'd be complicit in everything: the violence, the corruption, the darkness that seemed to seep from every corner of Volone Holdings. But beneath the fear, beneath the shock and horror, was something else. A question that had been building since the moment Nico had paid for her mother's surgery. "Why did you help me?" she asked quietly. "You could have hired anyone. Someone with experience, connections, someone who belonged in your world. Why take a chance on me?" Nico's expression shifted, something almost vulnerable flickering across his features before he locked it down. "Because you told me the truth. In my office, 23 minutes late and desperate, you looked me in the eye and told me exactly what you needed. No games, no manipulation, just raw, honest desperation. Do you know how rare that is? So you bought my loyalty. I invested in your potential." He set down his glass with deliberate care. "You're smart, Mara. Smarter than you realize. You found discrepancies that my auditors missed. You triggered that contract clause that saved me millions. You have instincts that can't be taught, the kind that keep people alive in this business. But instinct without discipline gets you killed. That's why I'm offering you this choice. Stay, and I'll teach you how to survive. Walk away, and you'll always wonder what you could have become." The words hung between them, heavy with promise and threat in equal measure. Mara thought about her mother, recovering from surgery in a hospital bed, free from the debt that would have crushed them both. She thought about the apartment she could barely afford, the jobs that had never been enough, the ex-boyfriend who'd left her with nothing. She thought about the moment she'd walked into Nico's office and demanded a chance, and the dangerous, impossible man who'd given it to her. She thought about Graham Kessler's body hitting the floor, and she made her choice. "I'll stay," she said. "But I need to know the truth. All of it. What is Valone Holdings really?" Nico stood, walked to the windows, and stared out at the city spread beneath them like a kingdom. When he spoke, his voice was quiet and edged with something that might have been regret. "My father built this empire on blood and fear. He controlled half the city's underground operations, drugs, weapons, protection rackets, anything that turned a profit. When he died, I inherited everything: the business, the enemies, the legacy of violence that came with the Valone name." He turned to face her. "I've spent the last 5 years trying to go legitimate, converting dirty money into clean investments, cutting ties with the old networks, building something that could survive in daylight. But the past doesn't let go easily. There are people who want me dead, people who want to drag me back into the darkness. Graham was one of them." "Damien Benedetti," Mara said, remembering the name Graham had gasped out before the gunshot. "Who is he?" Nico's expression hardened. "He was my father's rival. They divided the city between them, uneasy peace held together by mutual threat. When my father died, Damien thought I'd be easy to eliminate. He was wrong. We've been at war ever since, a cold war fought in boardrooms and back alleys. Graham was his inside man, feeding him information, setting up sabotage. If I hadn't stopped him tonight, the damage could have been catastrophic. So you killed him." "I eliminated a threat." Nico crossed back to where she sat, and Mara had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "In my world, hesitation is death. Graham chose his side and he paid the price. I won't apologize for that." "I'm not asking you to." Mara's voice was steadier now, the shock beginning to crystallize into something harder. "But if I stay, if I'm part of this, I need to know what I'm protecting myself against. Who else wants you dead? What other threats are out there?" "Too many to count." Nico's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "But the immediate concern is Benedetti. He's been making moves, trying to reclaim territory he lost when I forced him out of legitimate business. Graham was just one piece. There will be others." "And Celeste Carrington?" Nico's eyes narrowed. "What about her?" "She came by the office. She said you two were close." "Celeste wants to be close. She wants the Valone name, the power that comes with it, the social capital of being married to someone with my reputation." His voice was cold, dismissive. "She's useful for appearances, nothing more." Mara absorbed this, filing it away. "And Silas? Can I trust him?" "Silas has been with me since we were kids. He's loyal to a fault, and he'll protect you as long as you're under my protection." Nico paused. "But he'll also kill you without hesitation if he thinks you're a threat to me. That's the balance you're walking now. Trust, but verify. Loyalty, but awareness." "You're asking me to live in constant fear." "I'm asking you to live with eyes open. Nico sat down beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. Fear is useful. It keeps you sharp. But terror is paralysis. The key is learning the difference. Mara looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the layers beneath the ice, the exhaustion, the calculation, the weight of choices that had built a throne from bones and regret. This was a man who'd been forged in violence and was trying desperately to claw his way toward something better. "Teach me," she said. "Everything. How to read people, how to spot threats, how to survive in your world without losing myself." Something flickered in Nico's eyes. Surprise, maybe, or respect. That's not an easy path. Nothing worth doing ever is. For a long moment they sat in silence, two people balanced on the knife's edge between trust and destruction. Then Nico stood, offered her his hand, and when she took it, his grip was warm and surprisingly gentle. "Welcome to the real Valoni Holdings, Ms. Quinn. Let's hope you don't regret it." The next morning, Mara arrived at the office at 6:55 a.m. to find the 15th floor transformed. Graham Kessler's office was sealed with crime scene tape, and a memo had already circulated announcing his sudden departure for personal reasons. The story was airtight: offshore accounts discovered, resignation accepted, investigation pending. No one questioned it. No one dared. Silas was waiting at her desk, his expression unreadable. He set down a slim black folder. "New protocols," he said curtly. "You're now classified as Level 3 security clearance. That means access to confidential files, priority communication channels, and protection detail when necessary. Read the briefing, memorize it, burn it." Mara opened the folder and scanned the contents. It was a crash course in survival, codes for different types of threats, emergency contact numbers, safe houses scattered throughout the city, and a list of people she was never to trust under any circumstances. Celeste Carrington's name was near the top. "Why is she on the watch list?" Mara asked. Silas's mouth tightened. "Because Celeste doesn't just want Nico. She wants control. She's been trying to leverage her family's connections to force a merger between Carrington Industries and Valione Holdings. If that happens, Nico loses autonomy. He becomes a figurehead in his own company. And she thinks marrying him would accomplish that? She thinks it would give her legitimacy, make her indispensable." Silas leaned closer, his voice dropping. "But here's what you need to understand. Celeste is dangerous because she believes she's entitled to win. People like that don't quit. They escalate." Mara thought about the woman in the designer suit, the condescending smile, the subtle threat wrapped in false courtesy. What does she know about Benedetti? Nothing confirmed, but she's smart enough to connect dots. Silas straightened. "Watch yourself around her, and if she ever asks you about Nico's business, about meetings, schedules, anything, you tell me immediately." "Understood." He left without another word, and Mara sat there staring at the list of names and threats, feeling the weight of her new reality settle over her like armor. The morning unfolded with brutal efficiency. Mara fielded calls, managed schedules, and learned to read the subtle signals that meant danger. A hesitation on the phone, a name mentioned in passing, the way Nico's jaw tightened when certain topics arose. She was learning a new language, one spoken in silences and implications. At 11 a.m., Nico summoned her to his office. She found him standing at the windows, his posture tense. "We have a situation," he said without preamble. "Benedetti knows about Graham. He's going to retaliate." Mara's pulse spiked. "How do you know?" "Because I would." Nico turned to face her, and the cold calculation in his eyes made her shiver. "Graham was an investment. Benedetti won't let that loss go unanswered. He'll hit back, and he'll do it in a way designed to hurt me most." "What do we do?" "We prepare." Nico crossed to his desk and pulled up a series of files on his computer. "I'm moving you to a secure location, effective immediately." "What?" "No." Mara stepped forward, her heart racing. "I'm not running." "This isn't running, it's strategy." Nico's voice was firm, unyielding. "You're a target now, whether you like it or not. Benedetti will investigate Graham's death. He'll discover you were in the building that night. He'll connect the dots. And when he does, he'll use you to get to me. So teach me how to protect myself." "I am, by keeping you alive." Nico's expression softened just barely. Mara, you've been in this world for less than a week. You don't have the training, the experience, or the resources to defend yourself against someone like Benedetti. But you will. I promise. For now, I need you somewhere safe while I handle the immediate threat. Mara wanted to argue, wanted to prove she was strong enough to stand her ground. But the memory of Graham's body hitting the floor, the casual efficiency of Nico's violence, stopped her. Where? She asked quietly. A building I own in Brooklyn. Secured, monitored, and staffed with people loyal to me. You'll have everything you need, and I'll have peace of mind knowing you're protected. For how long? Until I neutralize the threat. Nico's jaw tightened. However long that takes. Mara nodded slowly, her mind already racing through implications. What about my mother? She's still recovering. Already handled. I'm moving her to a private recovery facility with round-the-clock nursing care. She'll be safe, comfortable, and completely unaware of why the change was necessary. Of course he'd thought of that. Of course he'd moved pieces on the board before she'd even realized the game had shifted. Thank you, Mara said, and meant it. Nico studied her for a long moment, something unreadable in his expression. Don't thank me yet. This is just the beginning. 2 hours later, Mara was in an SUV with tinted windows, Silas behind the wheel, speeding through Brooklyn streets toward a future she couldn't predict. Her phone was gone. Silas had confiscated it and given her a secured device with exactly 3 contacts: Nico, Silas, and emergency services. The building was a converted warehouse in Red Hook, nondescript from the outside but fortified like a bunker within. Silas walked her through security protocols, introduced her to the 2 guards who'd be on rotation, and showed her to a loft apartment that was surprisingly comfortable. Exposed brick, modern furniture, and windows that overlooked the harbor. You'll be safe here, Silas said, but don't test the boundaries. Don't leave without clearance, and don't trust anyone who isn't on the approved list. When will I see Nico again? When it's safe. Or when he needs you. Silas paused at the door, his expression almost sympathetic. For what it's worth, you handled last night better than most people would have. The boss sees potential in you. Don't waste it. He left, and Mara stood alone in the loft, surrounded by silence and the weight of everything that had changed in less than 72 hours. She'd come to New York desperate and broke, looking for a job that would save her mother's life. She'd found that. And so much more. She'd found a world built on blood and power, a man who ruled it with ice and fire, and a version of herself she hadn't known existed. The version that had chosen to stay, the version that wanted to learn how to survive, the version that looked at Nico Vallone, murderer, kingpin, complicated disaster of a man, and saw not just danger but possibility. She didn't know if that made her brave or insane, but she knew with absolute certainty that there was no going back. 3 days passed in careful isolation. Mara read everything Silas had given her, memorizing faces, names, threat assessments. She studied the structure of Nico's organization, the legitimate businesses that fronted darker operations, the careful balance between legality and survival. She learned the history of the Vallone-Benedetti War, the bodies buried on both sides, the fragile détente that had shattered when Nico's father died. She learned about Damien Benedetti, ruthless, calculating, and utterly without mercy, a man who'd built his empire on fear and maintained it through brutal demonstration of power, a man who didn't forgive, didn't forget, and who, according to the intelligence reports, was now actively hunting for the woman who'd witnessed Graham Kessler's execution. On the 4th night, Nico arrived without warning. Mara was reading when the door opened, and she looked up to find him standing in her apartment, still in his suit, his tie loosened, exhaustion carved into every line of his face. "You look terrible," she said before she could stop herself. "I feel worse." Nico crossed to the windows, staring out at the dark harbor. Benedetti made his move. 3 of my legitimate holdings hit with code violations, health inspections, and IRS audits, all within 48 hours. He's using legal channels to bleed me dry. Can you fight it? I'm already fighting it, but it's going to cost time, money, and resources I can't afford to waste. He turned to face her, and the raw frustration in his eyes made her chest tighten. He knows I'm trying to go legitimate. He knows that's my weak point, So he's attacking the very thing I'm trying to build. Mara stood, crossed to him, and did something she hadn't planned. She reached out and touched his arm. Nico went very still. Then we make him regret it, she said quietly. We find his weak point and hit back harder. His weak point is that he operates entirely in the shadows. Everything he owns is buried under shell corporations and proxies. He doesn't have legitimate holdings to attack. So we expose him. Mara's mind raced, pieces clicking together. You said he's been trying to reclaim territory. That means he's making moves, taking risks. He has to be leaving a trail, money, contacts, deals that don't quite add up. We find that trail and we drag it into daylight. Nico's eyes sharpened. You want to go after Benedetti directly. I want to protect what you're building, what we're building. Mara's voice was steady, certain. You gave me a choice, Nico. I chose to stay. I chose this world. Now let me help you fight for it. For a long moment he said nothing, just studied her with an intensity that made her skin flush. Then, slowly, he reached up and covered her hand with his where it rested on his arm. You understand what you're proposing, he said softly. Going after Benedetti means crossing a line. It means accepting that people will get hurt, that blood will be spilled. I watched you kill Graham Kessler, Mara said. I've already crossed that line. The question is, are you going to let me stand on this side of it alone, or are you going to teach me how to survive here? Nico's thumb traced small circles on the back of her hand, the gesture almost unconscious. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone who'd run, someone who'd break. His voice dropped to something raw and honest. Someone who'd look at me the way most people do, with fear and disgust. I'm terrified of you, Mara admitted. But I'm also fascinated. You're trying to build something better while fighting everyone who wants to drag you back down. That's not a monster. That's someone worth believing in. The words hung between them, fragile and dangerous. Then Nico pulled his hand away, the moment breaking, and stepped back. Get some sleep, he said, his voice carefully neutral. Tomorrow, we start your real education. He left as abruptly as he'd arrived, and Mara stood alone in the loft, her hand still warm from his touch, her heart racing with equal parts fear and anticipation. She'd made her choice. Now she just had to survive it. The education began at dawn. Mara woke to find Silas standing in her kitchen, brewing coffee like he owned the place. He slid a thick manila envelope across the counter without greeting. Financial records, he said. Benedetti's known associates, their business dealings, anything that might connect back to him. The boss wants you to find patterns, inconsistencies, anything we can use. Mara opened the envelope, her eyes scanning pages of dense financial data. This is hundreds of transactions. Then you'd better get started. Silas poured 2 cups of coffee, set one in front of her. You wanted to help. This is how you help. We don't have soldiers we can throw at Benedetti without starting a war that'll get innocent people killed. But we have intelligence. We have resources. And now we have you, someone he doesn't know about, someone who can see patterns the rest of us miss. No pressure, Mara muttered. But she was already pulling out the first document, her mind shifting into the analytical mode that had helped her survive 3 jobs and a mountain of debt. Silas leaned against the counter, watching her. The boss told me what you said last night, about wanting to protect what he's building. And I think you're either the bravest person I've ever met or the most foolish. His expression softened, just barely. Probably both, but for what it's worth, I'm glad you stayed. Nico needs someone who sees him as more than just the Valoni name. Mara looked up, surprised. You care about him. He's my brother in everything but blood. I've watched him fight his father's legacy for 5 years, watched him try to build something clean out of dirt and corruption. It's killing him, the weight of it. And then you walked in, 23 minutes late and desperate, and for the first time in months, I saw him actually interested in something other than survival. Silas straightened, his usual hard mask sliding back into place. Don't make me regret supporting this. He left, and Mara spent the next 6 hours drowning in numbers, cross-referencing shell corporations and offshore accounts, building a web of connections that slowly began to reveal a pattern. Benedetti was careful, but he wasn't perfect. Money had to move, deals had to be made, and every transaction left a trace. however faint. By early afternoon, she'd identified 3 companies that appeared legitimate on the surface, but had irregular payment schedules and unexplained cash infusions. She was deep into the 4th file when her new phone buzzed. Nico's name flashed on the screen. "I need you at the office," he said without preamble. "We have a situation." 20 minutes later, Mara was back at Valoni Holdings for the first time since the night Graham died. The building felt different now, charged with tension, everyone moving with heightened awareness. She could feel eyes tracking her as Silas escorted her to Nico's office, could hear the whispers that followed in her wake. The new girl. The one who'd survived her first week. The one the boss had personally relocated to a safe house. Nico was on the phone when she entered, his voice clipped and cold. He gestured for her to sit, finished the call with a terse confirmation, and turned his full attention to her. "Celeste knows about you," he said without preamble. Mara's stomach dropped. "How?" "Because she makes it her business to know everything that happens in my orbit. She showed up at my apartment this morning asking questions about my new assistant, the one I've taken such a personal interest in." His jaw tightened. "She's fishing, trying to figure out if you're a threat to her plans." "What did you tell her?" "That you're an employee, nothing more. That I moved you for security reasons related to Graham's investigation." Nico leaned back in his chair, studying her. "She didn't believe me. She's going to dig, and when she does, she's going to find connections. Your mother's surgery, the safe house, the fact that I've given you access to confidential files. She'll twist it into something it's not." "What is it?" Mara asked quietly. "What are we exactly?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications neither of them seemed ready to address. Nico's eyes darkened, and for a moment, Mara thought he might actually answer honestly. Then his expression closed, shutting her out. "You're an asset," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Someone with skills I need and loyalty I can trust. That's all Celeste needs to know. That's all anyone needs to know." The words stung more than they should have, but Mara forced herself to nod. "Understood. What do you need me to do?" "I need you to meet her." Nico stood, crossing to the windows. "She's demanded lunch tomorrow. She'll ask questions, probe for weaknesses, try to determine if you're competition or collateral. I need you to convince her you're neither." "You want me to lie to her?" "I want you to survive her." He turned, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "Celeste is dangerous because she believes she's entitled to power. She'll smile while she destroys you if she thinks it'll get her what she wants. So you meet her, you play the role of the overwhelmed assistant who's in over her head, and you give her nothing she can use against either of us." Mara thought about the woman in the designer suit, the condescending smile, the casual cruelty wrapped in politeness. "And if she doesn't buy it? Then we'll deal with the consequences." Nico's expression hardened, "But I prefer we avoid that scenario. Can you do this?" Mara stood, meeting his eyes with more confidence than she felt. "I've been acting my whole life, Nico, pretending I wasn't broke, pretending I wasn't terrified, pretending I had everything under control when I was falling apart. This is just another performance." Something flickered across his face. Respect, maybe, or concern. "This isn't a performance you can afford to mess up." "Then I won't." The lunch meeting was set for noon at an upscale restaurant in Midtown, the kind of place where the waiters wore white gloves and the cheapest entree cost more than Mara used to make in a day. She arrived 5 minutes early, wearing a conservative dress Silas had somehow procured overnight, her hair pulled back, her makeup understated. Celeste was already there, holding court at a corner table, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her smile sharp as glass. "Mara," she said, as though they were old friends. "So lovely of you to join me. Please, sit." Mara sat, acutely aware of every eye in the restaurant tracking the interaction. This was theater, and Celeste was the director. "I hope you don't mind," Celeste continued, her voice warm and entirely false. "I took the liberty of ordering for both of us. The Dover sole here is exquisite." "That's very kind of you," Mara said, keeping her tone polite and deferential. Celeste's smile widened. "I wanted to get to know you better. After all, you've become quite the topic of conversation lately. Nico's mysterious new assistant, whisked away to undisclosed locations, given access most people work years to achieve. It's all very intriguing. I'm just doing my job. Of course you are. Celeste's eyes were cold, calculating. Tell me, how did you come to work for Nico? I understand your background is rather unconventional. Mara had prepared for this, had rehearsed the story with Silas until it felt like truth. I was desperate. I needed a job, and Valoni Holdings was hiring. I got lucky. Lucky? Celeste repeated, her tone suggesting she didn't believe in luck. And the fact that Nico personally paid for your mother's surgery? That was also luck? Mara's pulse spiked, but she kept her expression neutral. Mr. Valoni is generous with his employees. My mother needed help, and he provided it. I'm grateful. I'm sure you are. Celeste took a sip of her wine, her gaze never leaving Mara's face. But gratitude can be complicated, can it? Especially when it comes with strings attached. I don't know what you mean. Don't you? Celeste leaned forward, her voice dropping to something almost intimate. Let me be clear, Mara. Nico Valoni is a powerful man with a complicated history and even more complicated future. He needs someone who understands his world, someone who can navigate the social and business complexities he faces. Someone like me. What he doesn't need is a distraction in the form of a grateful employee who mistakes professional kindness for something more personal. The words were wrapped in silk, but the threat beneath them was steel. Mara felt anger flare hot in her chest, but she tamped it down, channeling it into the performance Nico needed. I understand my place, Ms. Carrington, she said quietly. I'm an assistant, nothing more. Whatever you think is happening, you're wrong. Celeste studied her for a long moment, and Mara had the unsettling sense of being dissected. Then Celeste's smile returned, bright and brittle. I'm so glad we understand each other. I'd hate for there to be any confusion about who belongs in Nico's life and who's simply passing through. She raised her wine glass in a mock toast. To clarity. Mara lifted her water glass, meeting Celeste's eyes with steady resolve. To clarity. The rest of the lunch was excruciating. 45 minutes of veiled insults and careful probing, Celeste fishing for information while Mara deflected and dodged. By the time the check arrived, Mara felt like she'd run a marathon, every muscle tense, every nerve raw. Celeste signed the bill with a flourish and stood, smoothing her designer dress. This was lovely, Mara. We should do it again sometime. And please, give Nico my best. Tell him I'm looking forward to our dinner on Friday. She left in a cloud of expensive perfume, and Mara sat alone at the table, her hands shaking with suppressed rage and adrenaline. She'd survived the encounter, had played her role perfectly, but the threat was clear. Celeste saw her as competition, and in Celeste's world, competition was eliminated. Mara returned to the safe house that afternoon to find Nico waiting for her, his expression dark with barely contained fury. The moment she walked through the door, he was on his feet. She threatened you, he said, not a question but a statement of fact. How did you? Because I know Celeste. I know how she operates. He crossed to her in 3 strides, his hands gripping her shoulders. What did she say? Exactly. Mara relayed the conversation, watching Nico's expression grow progressively colder with each word. By the time she finished, his jaw was tight enough to crack. She's escalating, he said, his voice low and dangerous. She thinks she can intimidate you into disappearing. She can't. No. Nico's hands gentled on her shoulders, his thumbs brushing against her collarbone in a gesture that felt unconscious and devastatingly intimate. She can't. Because you're under my protection, and anyone who threatens you threatens me. The words sent a shiver down Mara's spine. Not fear, but something far more dangerous. She looked up at him, at the fierce protectiveness burning in his dark eyes, and felt something shift between them. Nico, she said softly. What are we doing? His hands dropped away like she'd burned him. He stepped back, the walls slamming into place so fast it left her breathless. We're surviving, he said, his voice carefully controlled. That's all. Don't read more into this than exists. But Mara had seen the truth in his eyes before he'd locked it away. Had felt it in the way his hands had lingered on her shoulders, the way his voice had turned lethal at the thought of someone threatening her. This wasn't just about survival anymore. Maybe it never had been. She didn't push. Instead, she pulled out her phone and showed him the financial analysis she'd completed that morning. I found 3 companies with irregular patterns. They're all connected to the same offshore bank, and the timing of their transactions corresponds with known Benedetti operations. Nico's focus shifted instantly, his mind engaging with the problem. He studied her findings, his expression sharpening. This is good. Very good. If we can prove these companies are fronts, we can trigger investigations that'll freeze Benedetti's assets. There's more. Mara pulled up a second document. One of the companies, Meridian Imports, has a delivery scheduled for tomorrow night. Big shipment coming through the Brooklyn docks. The manifest says industrial equipment, but the value declared doesn't match the shipping weight. Nico's eyes lifted to hers. You think it's something else? I think it's worth investigating. It's also incredibly dangerous. Nico set down the phone, his expression troubled. If Benedetti's moving something through that shipment and we intercept it, we're starting a war. You're already at war, Mara said. He's just been dictating the terms. This is a chance to take control of the narrative. Nico studied her for a long moment, something like pride flickering across his features. When did you become a strategist? When I decided to survive in your world instead of just existing in it. He almost smiled. Almost. All right, we'll check out the shipment, but you're staying here. Like hell I am. Mara, you said you'd teach me how to survive. You said I had potential. She stepped closer, refusing to back down. I found this lead. I want to see it through. And before you argue, remember that I've already seen you kill someone. I'm not some fragile thing that needs to be protected from reality. Nico's jaw worked, tension radiating from every line of his body. Finally, he exhaled sharply. Fine, but you follow my lead, you do exactly as I say, and if things go sideways, you run. Understood? Understood. And Mara? His voice dropped, low and intense. If something happens to you, if you get hurt because I brought you into this, I'll never forgive myself. So please, for both our sakes, be smart. The vulnerability in his words stole her breath, but before she could respond, he was already moving toward the door. We leave at midnight. Dress dark, wear good shoes, and bring that sharp mind of yours. We're going to need it. The Brooklyn docks at midnight were a study in shadows and industrial decay. Mara followed Nico through a maze of shipping containers, Silas flanking them with 2 additional men she'd never seen before. The air smelled like salt and rust, and the only sounds were the lap of water against concrete and their careful footsteps. Nico moved like a predator, every motion economical and precise. He led them to a vantage point overlooking the warehouse where Meridian Imports' shipment was scheduled to arrive. There, Silas murmured, pointing to a black van pulling up to the loading dock. Right on time. They watched as 4 men emerged from the van, followed by a 5th figure that made Nico go rigid. Damien Benedetti, he breathed. He's here personally. Whatever's in that shipment, it's important enough for him to risk exposure. Mara studied the man who'd become the architect of so much violence. He was older than she'd expected, maybe late 50s with silver hair and the kind of commanding presence that drew eyes even in darkness. He spoke to his men with sharp gestures, clearly irritated about something. Can you hear what they're saying? Mara whispered. Silas pulled out a directional microphone, adjusting the settings. Benedetti's voice crackled through, tinny but clear. Don't care what the manifest says. I want this moved tonight. The feds are sniffing around the import company, and I won't risk exposure over a shipment of surplus weapons. Mara's pulse jumped. Weapons. Not industrial equipment. Weapons. Nico's expression was carved from stone. Get everything on video. Audio, visual, timestamps. This is the evidence we need. Silas was already recording when headlights suddenly swept across the dock, followed by the distinctive sirens of federal vehicles. The shipment scene exploded into chaos, Benedetti's men scattering, shouts echoing, the van peeling away in a screech of tires. Someone tipped them off, Nico said, his voice deadly quiet. Someone knew we'd be watching and called in the feds to muddy the waters. Celeste, Mara said, the pieces clicking together. She must have had me followed from lunch. She saw me come back here, put together that we were investigating something, and called it in to create chaos. Nico's fury was palpable, but he kept his voice controlled. We need to leave. Now. They melted back into the container maze, but they'd barely made it 20 feet when a voice cut through the darkness. Going somewhere, Valone? They froze. Emerging from behind a container was Damien Benedetti himself, flanked by 2 armed men. His smile was cold, amused, and utterly without mercy. I have to admit, Benedetti continued, his voice smooth as poison, I didn't expect you to be stupid enough to come here yourself, and with such interesting company. His eyes slid to Mara, assessing and dismissive. Who's the girl? New recruit? Or something more personal? Nico stepped in front of Mara, his body a shield. This doesn't concern her. Everything concerns me when it happens on my docks. Benedetti's smile widened. You've been a persistent thorn in my side, Nico. Just like your father. Always thinking you're smarter, better, more righteous than the rest of us. But look where we are, surrounded by my men, in my territory, caught in the act of industrial espionage. We're leaving, Nico said flatly. Let us pass, and this ends here. I don't think so. Benedetti gestured, and his men raised their weapons. You see, I've been waiting for an opportunity like this. A chance to end the Valone problem permanently. Your death here, tonight, during a federal raid? Tragic accident. Collateral damage. No one will question it. Mara's blood ran cold, but Nico remained perfectly still, his voice ice. You kill me, and you start a war you can't win. My organization doesn't disappear with my death. It escalates. Perhaps. But without you, it'll fracture. Leadership struggles, territory disputes, all the beautiful chaos that comes with a power vacuum. Benedetti's eyes glittered. I can work with chaos. The standoff stretched, tension coiling tighter with each passing second. Mara could see Silas calculating angles, could feel Nico's controlled fury radiating like heat. They were outgunned and trapped, and Benedetti knew it. Then federal agents came around the container, weapons drawn, and everything shattered into motion. Benedetti's men turned toward the new threat, creating a split-second window. Nico grabbed Mara's hand and ran, pulling her through the maze of containers as gunfire erupted behind them. Silas and his men provided covering fire, the night exploding into chaos and violence. Mara's lungs burned as they ran, her hand locked in Nico's grip, her world narrowing to the sound of their footsteps and the terrifying crack of bullets striking metal. They burst out of the container yard into an alley where a black SUV was already waiting, engine running. Nico shoved her into the back seat, dove in beside her, and the vehicle was moving before the door even closed. Drive, Nico snapped, and the driver complied, taking corners at speeds that defied physics. Mara couldn't breathe, couldn't think past the adrenaline screaming through her system. Beside her, Nico was making calls, his voice clipped and commanding, coordinating their escape and damage control in equal measure. Finally, he ended the last call and turned to her, his hands cupping her face with unexpected gentleness. Are you hurt? He demanded. No, I'm fine. Her voice broke, the reality of what had almost happened crashing over her. He was going to kill us. He was going to kill you. But he didn't. Nico's thumbs brushed her cheekbones, his eyes searching hers with fierce intensity. You're safe. That's all that matters. Nico, Celeste set us up. She had to have told Benedetti we'd be there. I know. His expression went cold, lethal. And she's going to answer for it. The SUV pulled into the underground garage of a building Mara didn't recognize, and they were ushered into a secure elevator. Nico didn't let go of her hand the entire ride up, his grip warm and grounding. They emerged into a penthouse even more luxurious than his office, all modern lines and expensive art. Silas was already there, along with 3 other men who looked like they'd seen combat. Benedetti got away, Silas reported grimly. But the feds seized the shipment. Whatever was in those crates is now federal evidence, which means Benedetti lost the weapons and the money invested in them, Nico said, a savage satisfaction in his voice. Good. Let him bleed. What about Celeste? Mara asked, finding her voice. Nico's expression turned to stone. Leave Celeste to me. The next morning, Celeste Carrington received a visit from Nico that would become the stuff of legend in their circles. He walked into her family's corporate headquarters flanked by lawyers, carrying documented evidence of her communication with Benedetti, her attempt to sabotage Vallone Holdings, and her direct involvement in tipping off both the feds and Benedetti about the dock operation. The meeting lasted 12 minutes. When Nico emerged, Celeste's engagement announcement, scheduled for the following week, had been permanently canceled, her access to Vallone Holdings revoked, and her reputation in New York's elite circles shattered beyond repair. She'd tried to destroy him and had destroyed herself instead. Mara heard about it secondhand through Silas, who recounted the story with grim satisfaction. She was back at the safe house, processing everything that had happened, when Nico arrived late that evening. He looked exhausted, the weight of the past 48 hours carved into every line of his face. Without a word, he crossed to where she sat and pulled her into his arms, holding her with a desperation that made her chest ache. "I almost lost you," he said into her hair, his voice raw. "At the docks. When Benedetti had us cornered, all I could think was that I'd brought you into this, that if you died, it would be my fault." Mara's arms came around him, holding him just as tightly. "But I didn't die. We survived. Together." Nico pulled back just enough to look at her, and what she saw in his eyes stole her breath, fear and fury, and something that looked dangerously close to devotion. "You're not just an asset," he said quietly. "You haven't been for a while now, and that terrifies me more than any war with Benedetti ever could." Mara reached up, cupping his face the way he'd done to her in the car. "Why?" "Because caring about someone makes you vulnerable. It gives your enemies a target. It means living with the constant fear that they'll be used against you, hurt to punish you, taken away to break you." His voice dropped to a whisper. "And I care about you, Mara. More than I should. More than is safe for either of us." The confession hung between them, fragile and fierce. Mara felt tears prick her eyes, but they weren't from fear. "Then we make each other stronger," she said. "We watch each other's backs. We fight smarter. We survive together instead of alone." She smiled through the tears. "You taught me that survival isn't about being invulnerable. It's about being willing to keep fighting even when you're terrified." Nico's laugh was soft, broken. "When did you get so wise?" "I had a good teacher." He kissed her then, fierce and desperate and achingly gentle all at once, and Mara kissed him back, pouring every ounce of defiance and hope and terrified courage into the connection between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nico rested his forehead against hers. "This doesn't make things easier," he warned. "I know. Benedetti will find out. He'll use it against us." "Let him try." Nico smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine and devastating. "You really are fearless, aren't you?" "No," Mara said honestly. "I'm terrified, but I'd rather be terrified with you than safe anywhere else." They had exactly 36 hours of peace before everything fell apart. Mara woke the next morning in Nico's penthouse, sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, his arm draped across her waist. For a handful of perfect moments, she let herself believe they could have this: stolen mornings, quiet intimacy, a future that didn't involve guns and threats and men who wanted them dead. Then Nico's phone shattered the illusion. He answered on the second ring, his voice still rough with sleep. "What is it?" Mara watched his expression shift from drowsy contentment to razor-sharp focus in the span of a heartbeat. He sat up, the sheet pooling around his waist, his entire body going rigid. "When?" A pause. "How bad?" Another pause, longer this time. "I'm on my way." He ended the call and was already moving, pulling on clothes with efficient speed. "There's been an incident at one of my warehouses in Queens. Fire, structural damage, 3 people injured." Mara sat up, clutching the sheet to her chest. "Benedetti?" "Almost certainly." Nico's jaw was tight, his eyes already distant with calculation. "He's escalating. The docks didn't break me, so now he's hitting my infrastructure directly." "I'm coming with you." "No." The word was flat, absolute. "You're staying here where it's safe. Silas will—" "Nico." Mara stood, crossing to him, her hand on his chest. "We just agreed. Together. No more keeping me in the dark. No more protection that's really isolation. If Benedetti's coming for you, I need to understand how he operates. I need to see what we're fighting against." Nico's hands came up to frame her face, his expression torn between protectiveness and pragmatism. If something happens to you, it won't, because you'll be there. She held his gaze, unflinching. Trust me, Nico, the way I'm trusting you. He exhaled sharply, then kissed her forehead with a tenderness that made her chest ache. Stay close to me. Do exactly as I say. And if I tell you to run, you run. Understood? Understood. The warehouse in Queens was a smoking ruin by the time they arrived. Fire trucks were still spraying water on the collapsed eastern wall, and EMTs were loading the injured into ambulances. Nico moved through the chaos with cold efficiency, speaking to his operations manager, examining the damage, his expression growing progressively darker. Mara stayed beside him, observing everything. The way his employees looked at him with a mixture of respect and fear. The way the fire chief deferred to him despite having no obligation to do so. The way Silas materialized at his shoulder, murmuring updates about accelerants found at 3 different points of origin. This wasn't an accident, it was a message. Boss, Silas said quietly, we found something you need to see. He led them to the warehouse's ruined office section, where investigators were documenting the scene. On what remained of the wall, spray-painted in stark red letters, was a message that made Mara's blood run cold. Your father knew when to quit. You should learn. Below it, crudely drawn, was the Benedetti family crest. Nico stared at the message, his expression unreadable, but Mara could see the tension in his shoulders, the white-knuckled grip of his hands. This wasn't just about business anymore. This was personal, a direct attack on the Valloni legacy. He's trying to provoke you, Mara said softly. He wants you angry, wants you to make a mistake. I know. Nico's voice was glacial, which is why I'm not going to give him the satisfaction. But as they drove back to Manhattan, Mara could see the calculation in his eyes, the wheels turning behind that carefully controlled exterior. Nico was planning something that scared her even as it fascinated her. They were halfway across the Queensboro Bridge when Nico's phone rang again. He glanced at the screen, frowned, and answered. What? His expression shifted from irritation to something far more dangerous. When did this happen? A pause. I'll handle it. Keep her comfortable and don't let anyone else in the room. He ended the call and immediately dialed another number. Silas, get to St. Vincent's Hospital. Someone tried to access Mara's mother's room. Security stopped them, but I want our people on her floor immediately. Mara's entire world tilted. What? Is she okay? She's fine. The nurse noticed someone trying to bypass the security protocols I put in place. They fled before anyone could identify them, but... Nico's jaw tightened. Benedetti knows about your mother. He knows she's your vulnerability. Terror lanced through her, sharp and paralyzing. We have to move her, now. Somewhere he can't find her. Already in motion, Nico's hand found hers, squeezing tight. I have a private facility in Westchester. Full medical staff, security detail, completely off the grid. She'll be transferred within the hour. I need to see her. I need to make sure she's okay. We'll go to the hospital first, verify she's stable, then move her. Nico's voice was steady, grounding. But Mara, you need to prepare yourself. Your mother is going to ask questions. She's going to want to know why she needs a security detail, why she's being moved to a private facility. What are you going to tell her? Mara's mind raced. She couldn't tell her mother the truth, that she'd fallen into a war between criminal empires, that the man she was falling for had enemies who'd use any weakness against him, that her decision to stay had put her mother in the crosshairs. I'll tell her it's a precaution, she said finally, that there have been threats against Valloni Holdings employees and Mr. Valloni is ensuring all family members are protected. She doesn't need to know the details. Can you sell that? I've been selling survival my entire life. This is just another performance. But when they arrived at St. Vincent's and Mara saw her mother, pale but recovering, sitting up in bed with confusion and fear in her eyes, the performance became brutally real. Mara, sweetheart, what's going on? Her mother reached for her hand, her grip weak but desperate. The nurses won't tell me anything, and there are men in suits standing outside my door like I'm some kind of criminal. You're not in trouble, Mom. Mara sat on the edge of the bed, forcing her voice to stay calm. There have been some security concerns at my work. My boss is being cautious, making sure all employees and their families are safe. Security concerns? Her mother's eyes widened. What kind of work are you doing? You said it was office administration. It is, but Mr. Vallone deals with high-stakes business, and sometimes that attracts unwanted attention. This is just a precaution. Her mother studied her face with the unnerving perception of someone who'd raised her alone through poverty and crisis. You're scared. I can see it. What aren't you telling me? Mara's throat tightened, but before she could answer, Nico appeared in the doorway. He moved into the room with quiet authority, his expression gentle in a way Mara had never seen him use with anyone else. Mrs. Quinn, he said, offering his hand, I'm Nico Vallone. I wanted to apologize personally for the disruption to your recovery. Her mother shook his hand warily, her eyes sharp and assessing. You're Mara's boss. I am, and I take the safety of my employees very seriously. We've had some threats made against the company, and out of an abundance of caution, I'm ensuring that all vulnerable family members are moved to secure locations until the situation is resolved. What kind of threats? The kind that people in my position unfortunately have to deal with regularly. Corporate espionage, disgruntled competitors. Nothing you need to worry about. His voice was smooth, reassuring, the perfect blend of authority and concern. I have a private recovery facility in Westchester with excellent medical staff and security. You'll be more comfortable there, and Mara will be able to visit without worrying about your safety. Mara watched her mother process this, saw the moment she decided to accept the explanation, even though she clearly didn't believe all of it. Her mother was many things, but she wasn't foolish. She knew there was more to the story, but she also knew Mara well enough to recognize when pushing would do more harm than good. All right, her mother said finally. But Mara, I want you to be careful. Whatever's happening, whatever this job really involves, promise me you'll be smart about it. I promise, Mom. Her mother's eyes shifted to Nico, and something passed between them. An understanding, perhaps, or a warning. Mr. Vallone, my daughter is all I have in this world. If anything happens to her because of your business, there's nowhere you'll be able to hide from me. A faint smile touched Nico's lips. I wouldn't expect anything less, Mrs. Quinn. And for what it's worth, I have no intention of letting anything happen to your daughter. The transfer happened smoothly. Mara's mother whisked away in a private ambulance with a security detail that could have protected a diplomat. Mara watched the vehicle disappear, her chest tight with a mixture of relief and guilt. She knows, she said quietly. She knows this is more than corporate espionage. Mothers usually do. Nico's hand settled on the small of her back, warm and grounding. But she also loves you enough to trust your judgment. Don't take that for granted. They returned to Vallone Holdings to find the office in controlled chaos. News of the warehouse fire had spread, and employees moved through the halls with heightened tension, conversation stopping abruptly when Nico passed. He called an emergency meeting with his senior leadership, and Mara sat in the corner of the conference room, watching him command the space with the same cold authority he brought to everything. The attack on our Queen's facility was coordinated and deliberate, Nico said, his voice carrying across the room. Our competitor is trying to destabilize our operations, force us into a defensive position, and ultimately drive us out of the market. We're not going to let that happen. I want security doubled at all facilities, background checks on anyone hired in the last 6 months, and a complete audit of our supply chains. If there are any more plants waiting to sabotage us, I want them found and removed immediately. His CFO, a nervous man who'd replaced Graham Kessler, cleared his throat. Sir, the increased security measures will be expensive. Combined with the lost inventory from the fire, we're looking at significant financial impact this quarter. I don't care about the quarterly numbers. I care about survival. Nico's eyes swept the room, and Mara saw several people flinch under the weight of his gaze. Anyone who thinks cutting corners on security is a viable option can submit their resignation today. For everyone else, you have your orders. Get to work. The meeting dispersed quickly, executives scurrying to implement Nico's directives. Silas remained behind, along with 2 men Mara recognized from the dock operation. We have a problem, Silas said without preamble. Benedetti's not just attacking infrastructure, he's going after our people. 3 of our mid-level managers received offers this morning, double their current salaries to jump ship and work for shell companies we've traced back to Benedetti operations. Nico's jaw tightened. Did any of them accept? Not yet, but they're tempted. He's targeting people with families, people who can't afford to turn down that kind of money. Then we match the offers. Triple them if necessary. Nico's voice was hard, absolute. I'm not losing my people because Benedetti waves money around. And make it clear, anyone who even considers his offer will never work in this city again. Already handled, boss. Good. What else? Silas hesitated, his eyes flicking to Mara. We intercepted communication that suggests Benedetti knows about Ms. Quinn. Not just her mother, he knows she was at the docks. He knows you've been protecting her, and he's putting together why. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Nico went very still, the kind of stillness that preceded violence. How much does he know? Nico's voice was deadly quiet. Enough to be dangerous. He's got surveillance photos of you two together, timeline analysis that shows when she moved to the safe house, financial records of the surgery payment. Silas pulled out a tablet, showing them a dossier that made Mara's stomach turn. Her entire life laid out in stark detail. Her work history, her mother's illness, her ex-boyfriend's theft. He's building a profile, trying to figure out if she's an asset or a weakness. She's neither, Nico said flatly. She's off limits. Make that clear through whatever channels we need to use. Boss, with respect, sending that message might confirm what he suspects, that she matters to you. That gives him exactly what he wants. I don't care what he wants. Mara's under my protection, and anyone who touches her dies. That's not a negotiation. That's a fact. The raw possessiveness in Nico's voice sent a shiver through Mara. Not fear, but something far more complicated. She stood, crossing to where he stood rigid with barely controlled fury. Nico, she said quietly, can I speak with you, privately? He nodded curtly, and they moved into his office, the door closing behind them with a soft click. The moment they were alone, Nico's carefully controlled mask cracked. He's coming for you, Nico said, his voice rough with emotions he couldn't quite contain. Everything I've done to keep you safe, and he's still going to try to use you against me. Then we use that, Mara said, an idea crystallizing in her mind. We make him think I'm exactly what he suspects, your weakness. We let him think he can get to you through me. Absolutely not. Listen to me. Mara grabbed his arms, forcing him to focus on her. Benedetti is smart, but he's also arrogant. He thinks he understands you, thinks he knows how you'll react. What if we give him exactly what he expects, but on our terms? What if we set a trap using me as bait? Nico's expression turned thunderous. You want to put yourself in danger deliberately? Have you lost your mind? I want to end this before more people get hurt, before he destroys everything you've built, before he kills you. Mara's voice shook, but her resolve was iron. You said I have good instincts. Trust them. Trust me. Mara, if something goes wrong, then you'll be there to make sure it doesn't. You, Silas, your entire security team. We plan this carefully. We control every variable, and we finally take Benedetti down the way he deserves, by outsmarting him. Nico stared at her, emotions warring across his face. She could see the strategist in him recognizing the logic of her plan, even as everything else in him screamed to refuse. What exactly are you proposing? He asked finally, his voice carefully neutral. Mara took a deep breath. We leak information that I've discovered something about Benedetti's operations. Financial records, proof of criminal activity, something he can't afford to have exposed. We make it look like I'm trying to protect you by going to the authorities myself, acting alone because I'm in over my head. He'll see me as a threat that needs to be eliminated, but also an opportunity. Grab me, use me to force you into a position of weakness. And when he takes the bait, when he has you in his hands, you'll be tracking me every second. The moment he moves, you move. We get him on kidnapping charges, federal prosecution, everything we need to put him away for life. Clean, legal, no more shadow war. Silas, who'd apparently been listening at the door, pushed it open. It could work. If we do it right, if we have fail-safes in place, we could end this without starting a bloodbath in the streets. Or she could end up dead. Nico said harshly. You're both insane if you think I'm going to use the woman I... He stopped abruptly, his jaw clenching. The unfinished sentence hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Mara's heart hammered against her ribs. The woman you what? She asked softly. Nico's eyes met hers, and for once he didn't hide behind walls or calculated distance. The woman I can't afford to lose. The woman who walked into my office, desperate and fearless, and somehow made me believe that building something better was actually possible. The woman who sees me as more than the Vallone name, more than my father's legacy, more than the violence that's followed me my entire life. His voice dropped to a whisper. The woman I'm falling in love with, even though I know I shouldn't. Mara's breath caught. She'd known there was something between them, had felt it growing stronger with every shared danger and stolen moment. But hearing him say it, hearing the raw vulnerability in his voice, shattered something inside her chest and rebuilt it, stronger. Then trust me, she said, tears burning behind her eyes. Trust that I'm strong enough to do this. Trust that we're strong enough to survive this together. Nico pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was the only thing keeping him anchored to the earth. If anything happens to you, if he hurts you, there won't be enough of him left to bury. Nothing's going to happen to me, because you won't let it. They stood like that for a long moment, the world narrowing to just the two of them and the impossible choice they were making. Finally, Nico pulled back, his expression shifting into the cold strategist she'd first met in this office. If we do this, we do it my way. Complete surveillance, multiple extraction teams, and at the first sign of real danger, we abort. Understood? Understood. And Mara? His hand cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing across her skin. When this is over, when Benedetti is in custody, and we can finally breathe, remind me to tell you all the things I'm too terrified to say right now. She kissed him, soft and fierce, and full of promise. I'll hold you to that. The trap was set within 48 hours. Mara made a very public, very traceable phone call to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, requesting a meeting to discuss evidence of money laundering and illegal weapons trafficking. She used her real name, mentioned Vallone Holdings, and made sure the call was placed from a location Benedetti's surveillance would easily track. Then she waited. The first indication that Benedetti had taken the bait came in the form of a followed taxi. Mara was traveling from the safe house to a neutral location, a coffee shop in Greenwich Village that Nico's team had already secured and wired for surveillance. The tail was professional but not invisible, exactly what they'd expected. Mara's heart hammered as she entered the coffee shop, acutely aware of the tracking device embedded in her watch, the panic button disguised as a ring, and the 3 plainclothes security personnel scattered throughout the cafe. Nico was in a van 2 blocks away, watching everything through hidden cameras, his voice a steady presence in the nearly invisible earpiece she wore. I see the tail, Nico murmured. 2 men, dark sedan, parked across the street. Stay calm. Order your coffee like we discussed. Mara approached the counter, her hands only slightly shaking as she ordered a latte. She found a table near the window, pulled out her laptop, and opened a file that appeared to contain financial records, actually just convincing forgeries designed to look like damning evidence. She'd been there for 20 minutes when a man slid into the seat across from her. He was younger than she'd expected, well-dressed, with the kind of face that could blend into any crowd. His smile was pleasant, unthreatening, and entirely false. "Ms. Quinn," he said, his voice smooth. "My name is Marcus. I believe we have a mutual interest in certain financial irregularities." Mara's pulse spiked, but she kept her expression neutral. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" "Not yet, but I represent someone who's very interested in the information you've been gathering, information that could be dangerous in the wrong hands." In her ear, Nico's voice was tight with controlled fury. "Stay calm. We're tracking him. Silas has teams moving into position." "I don't know what you're talking about," Mara said, closing her laptop. "You must have me confused with someone else." Marcus's smile widened, his eyes cold. "I don't think so. You called the FBI this morning. You mentioned Vallone Holdings and evidence of criminal activity. That makes you either very brave or very foolish. Or someone trying to do the right thing." "The right thing?" Marcus laughed softly. "In this city, Ms. Quinn, the right thing usually gets people killed. My employer would like to offer you an alternative. Come with me, have a conversation, and perhaps we can reach an understanding that benefits everyone. And if I refuse? Then your mother's recovery facility in Westchester might experience some unfortunate complications. I hear she's doing so well. It would be a shame if her condition suddenly deteriorated. Rage and terror flooded through Mara in equal measure, but Nico's voice in her ear was steady, grounding. We have people at the facility. Your mother is safe. This is a bluff. Play along. Let him take you to Benedetti. We'll be right behind you. Mara forced herself to breathe, to think like Nico had taught her. You're threatening my mother. I'm presenting options. Come quietly, cooperate, and she stays safe. Make this difficult. And, Marcus shrugged, accidents happen in hospitals all the time. Fine, Mara stood, grabbing her bag. I'll come with you. But if anything happens to my mother, your employer will regret it. I'm sure he's terrified, Marcus said dryly. He led her out of the coffee shop to a black car with tinted windows. The moment the door closed behind her, Mara's world narrowed to the sound of her own heartbeat and Nico's voice in her ear, calm and deadly. I've got you. I'm tracking your location. Silas has 4 cars following at a distance. Whatever happens, whatever you see, remember, we're coming for you. I'm coming for you. Just survive until I get there. The car drove for what felt like hours, but was probably only 30 minutes, winding through Brooklyn until they reached a warehouse district Mara didn't recognize. Marcus led her inside a building that looked abandoned from the outside but was clearly operational within. And there, standing in the center of what looked like a makeshift office, was Damien Benedetti himself. He was older up close, his silver hair impeccable, his suit expensive, but his eyes were cold, assessing, and utterly ruthless. Ms. Quinn, he said, his voice cultured and chilling. Thank you for joining me. I apologize for the dramatic invitation, but discretion is essential in matters like this. You threatened my mother, Mara said, fury overriding fear. There's nothing discreet about that. Direct then. I appreciate directness. Benedetti gestured to a chair. Please sit. We have much to discuss. Mara remained standing. I have nothing to discuss with you. On the contrary, you have evidence that could be problematic for certain business interests. I'd like to understand exactly what you know and what you plan to do with that knowledge. I plan to give it to the FBI. Nico Vallone might be willing to play games with criminals, but I'm not. Benedetti's smile was sharp, predatory. Nico Vallone. Yes. Tell me, Ms. Quinn, what is your relationship with young Vallone? Professional or something more personal? In her ear, Nico's voice was strained. Don't answer that. Keep him talking, but don't give him ammunition. I work for him, Mara said carefully. That's all. Really? Because my sources suggest otherwise. The surgery payment, the safe house, the fact that he personally came to your rescue at the docks. Benedetti leaned closer, his eyes glittering with malicious amusement. You're his weakness, Ms. Quinn. The crack in his armor. And that makes you very valuable to me. Or very dangerous, Mara said, her voice steadier than she felt. Because if I matter to him the way you think I do, hurting me will only make him come after you harder. Perhaps. Or perhaps holding you will give me exactly the leverage I need to finally end the Vallone problem once and for all. Benedetti pulled out his phone. Let's find out, shall we? He made a call, and Mara's blood ran cold as she heard Nico's voice answer, tinny and distant through Benedetti's speaker. What do you want, Damien? I have something that belongs to you, Benedetti said, his smile widening. Or rather, someone. Would you like to hear her voice? Before Mara could react, Benedetti's man grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the phone. She could have fought, could have triggered the panic button, but Nico's earlier instructions echoed in her mind. Let him play out his hand. Give us time to get into position. Nico, she said, keeping her voice level. I'm okay, don't... Benedetti pulled the phone away. As you can hear, Ms. Quinn is alive and unharmed. For now. Whether that remains the case depends entirely on you. If you hurt her... Nico's voice was lethal, barely controlled. You'll what? Kill me? Start a war that'll destroy half the city? I don't think so. You've spent too long trying to go legitimate, trying to wash the blood off the Vallone name. You won't risk that for one woman. Benedetti's tone turned mocking, unless, of course, she really does mean more to you than your precious legacy. The silence stretched, agonizing. Then Nico spoke, his voice cold and empty. What do you want? I want you to understand something, Vallone. Your father knew when to quit. He understood that some fights can't be won, that sometimes survival means knowing when to walk away. You've been fighting me for 5 years, destroying my operations, turning my allies, trying to claim territory that was never yours to take. It ends tonight. What are your terms? You sign over controlling interest in Vallone Holdings to a company I specify. You step down from all leadership positions, you leave New York and never come back. Do this, and Ms. Quinn goes free, unharmed. Refuse, and Benedetti's smile was vicious. Well, let's just say her mother's recovery facility isn't as secure as you think. In Mara's ear, a separate channel Benedetti couldn't hear, Silas's voice cut in. We're in position, boss. Give the word, and we breach. But Nico's response wasn't what Mara expected. I'll do it, Nico said, his voice hollow. I'll sign whatever you want. Just let her go.
No, Mara shouted, lunging toward the phone. Nico, don't you dare! Benedetti's man grabbed her, clamping a hand over her mouth, but she could still hear Nico's voice, broken and defeated. Send me the documents. I'll sign them. Just promise me she walks away from this safely. You have my word, Benedetti said, triumph thick in his voice. The great Nico Vallone, brought to his knees by a woman. Your father would be so disappointed. And in that moment, with Benedetti gloating and Mara's heart breaking, she understood the real trap they'd set. Nico wasn't giving up. He was giving Benedetti exactly enough rope to hang himself with. Because admitting he'd kidnapped someone to extort a business deal, saying it out loud, on a recorded line, was a federal crime with no statute of limitations. They had him. The explosion of sound and motion happened so fast Mara barely processed it. Doors burst open, federal agents flooded in with weapons drawn, and Benedetti's expression shifted from triumph to shock to rage in the span of seconds. FBI! Hands where we can see them! Benedetti's men reached for weapons, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. Within minutes, everyone was on the ground, cuffed, while agents swarmed the building. And then Nico was there, pushing past federal agents, his eyes wild until they found her. He crossed the distance between them in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms so tightly she could barely breathe. I've got you, he whispered against her hair, his voice shaking. I've got you. You're safe. Mara clung to him, her own hands trembling. You were recording, the whole thing. Every word, federal wiretap fully authorized. The moment he made his demands, the moment he threatened you and your mother, he gave us everything we needed. Nico pulled back just enough to look at her, his hands framing her face. You were so brave, so damn brave, and I'm never putting you in danger like that again. It worked, she said, tears finally spilling over. We got him. We got him. Federal agents were already hauling Benedetti to his feet, reading him his rights. The older man's face was twisted with fury as his eyes found Nico. You think this is over? Benedetti snarled. You think putting me in prison ends anything? I have people, Vallone, people who'll finish what I started. Nico's expression was ice. No, you don't. Because while you were busy threatening the woman I love, my team was systematically dismantling your entire organization. Every lieutenant, every operation, every dollar you had hidden, it's all gone. You're not a king anymore, Damien. You're just a bitter old man going to prison for kidnapping and extortion. The agent escorting Benedetti pulled him away, but his voice carried back, venomous and desperate. This isn't finished. You hear me, Vallone? This isn't... The door slammed shut, cutting off his threats. Mara sagged against Nico, adrenaline finally crashing. Is it really over? The immediate threat? Yes. Benedetti's going away for a long time, and his organization is fractured. Nico's arms tightened around her. But there's still cleanup, still loose ends, still a future, Mara finished. One where we're not constantly looking over our shoulders. One where I can actually keep the promises I made. Nico pulled back,
his dark eyes searching hers. I told you when this was over, I'd say all the things I was too terrified to say before. Mara's heart stuttered. Nico, I love you, he said, the words raw and honest and devastating. I'm in love with you, Mara Quinn. You walked into my life desperate and fearless, and somehow you made me believe I could be something more than my father's legacy. You made me want to build something better, not just for myself, but for us. For a future I never thought I deserved. Tears streamed down her face, but she was smiling. I love you too. I've loved you since you paid for my mother's surgery and pretended it was just business. Since you trusted me with your secrets and taught me how to survive in your world. Since you looked at me like I was worth protecting instead of just another asset. Nico kissed her then, fierce and tender and full of promises neither of them had dared to make before. Around them, federal agents worked to process the scene, but in that moment, they existed in their own small universe. Two people who'd fought their way through darkness and found something worth fighting for. When they finally pulled apart, Silas was standing nearby, his expression carefully neutral, but his eyes warm. The feds want statements from both of you, he said. But I told them it could wait until morning. Figured you'd earned a few hours of peace. Thanks, Silas, Nico said, his hand still firmly clasped with Mara's. Don't thank me yet. You've still got Celeste's lawyers breathing down your neck, 3 board members questioning your judgment, and a media circus that's going to explode the moment news breaks about Benedetti's arrest. Silas's mouth quirked. But hey, at least you're alive to deal with it. Mara laughed, the sound surprising her. After everything, the fear, the danger, the impossible choices, she could still laugh. We'll handle it, she said, squeezing Nico's hand. Together. Nico looked down at her, and the expression on his face was something she'd never seen before. Not the ice-cold kingpin, not the calculating strategist. Just a man, exhausted and relieved and desperately in love. Together, he agreed. From now on. They left the warehouse hand in hand, stepping out into a New York night that felt different somehow, cleaner, brighter, full of possibility instead of threat. There was still work to do, still battles to fight, still a future to build from the ashes of violence and fear. But for the first time since Mara had walked into Nico Valloni's office 23 minutes late and desperate, she believed they might actually make it. The fallout from Damien Benedetti's arrest was immediate and explosive. By morning, every major news outlet in New York was running the story. Federal agents had dismantled one of the city's most notorious criminal organizations in a single coordinated strike. Damien Benedetti faced charges of kidnapping, extortion, weapons trafficking, and money laundering. His lieutenants were being rounded up across 3 states, and at the center of it all was a financial analyst who'd stumbled onto the conspiracy and risked everything to bring it down. Mara watched the news coverage from Nico's penthouse, her coffee growing cold in her hands as reporters breathlessly recounted a version of events that was both accurate and incomplete. They had the facts, the arrests, the charges, the scope of Benedetti's criminal empire. What they didn't have was the full story, the violence, the fear, the impossible choice between safety and survival. They're calling you a hero, Nico said, coming to stand behind her, his hands settling on her shoulders. I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who refused to run. That's what heroes are. His lips brushed the top of her head. People who stand their ground when everything in them screams to flee. Mara leaned back against him, drawing strength from his solid presence. What happens now? To us, I mean. To Vallone Holdings. Now we rebuild, clean up the damage, shore up the legitimate businesses, and prove that we can survive in daylight. Nico's arms came around her waist. But first, we deal with the immediate problems. The board wants answers. The feds want complete cooperation. And Celeste's lawyers are threatening a defamation lawsuit. Mara turned in his arms. Let them threaten. We have documentation of everything she did, the sabotage, the connection to Benedetti, the attempt to destroy you. If she wants to make this public, we'll bury her. Nico's smile was sharp, predatory. I knew there was a reason I fell in love with you. You think like a Vallone. I think like someone who's tired of powerful people getting away with hurting others. Mara's expression softened. But I also think we should be smart about this. Celeste is humiliated and desperate. Desperate people make mistakes. Let's give her the chance to walk away quietly before we force her hand. You're more merciful than I am. I'm more practical. A public war with Celeste will drag your name through the press at exactly the moment you're trying to prove you're legitimate. Better to make her disappear quietly than turn her into a sympathetic victim. Nico studied her with something like wonder. When did you get so good at strategy? I had an excellent teacher. She kissed him softly. And I've learned that sometimes the smartest move is the one that looks like kindness. The board meeting that afternoon was exactly as brutal as Mara had anticipated. 12 men and women sat around the massive conference table, their expressions ranging from skeptical to openly hostile. Nico stood at the head of the table, his posture radiating controlled authority, while Mara sat quietly to the side, observing. James Whitmore, the board chairman and one of Nico's father's old associates, led the attack. Let me see if I understand this correctly. In the span of 2 weeks, we've lost a CFO to alleged embezzlement, suffered a warehouse fire that cost us millions, and now our CEO has been intimately involved in a federal investigation that's plastered across every newspaper in the city. And you expect us to simply accept this as business as usual? I expect you to recognize that we've just eliminated our biggest competitor and positioned ourselves for unprecedented growth, Nico replied, his voice cold and level. Benedetti spent 5 years undermining our operations, stealing our clients, and sabotaging our infrastructure. He's gone. His organization is dismantled. That opens up markets we haven't been able to access since my father died. At what cost? Another board member, a sharp-eyed woman named Victoria Chen, leaned forward. Your personal involvement in this investigation raises serious questions about your judgment. The press is speculating about your methods, your connections, your relationship with... Her eyes slid to Mara. Your staff. My relationship with Ms. Quinn is not the board's concern, Nico said, steel entering his voice. It is when it affects the company's reputation, Whitmore interjected. We have investors asking questions, partners reconsidering contracts, and a media circus that makes us look like we're operating on the wrong side of the law. Mara had stayed silent up to this point, but now she stood, her voice cutting through the tension. With respect, Mr. Whitmore, Valone Holdings has been operating in a legal gray area since long before I arrived. The difference is that now you're being forced to choose. You can continue profiting from the legacy of Nico's father, the connections, the fear, the shadow operations that kept this company afloat. Or you can support Nico's vision of building something legitimate, something that can survive scrutiny and thrive in daylight. But you can't have both. The room went silent. Every eye turned to her, and Mara felt the weight of their judgment, their surprise that she dared to speak. Ms. Quinn, Victoria Chen said carefully, you've been with this company for less than a month. What makes you think you understand its complexities? Because I've seen what it looks like from the outside. I've watched Nico fight to transform a criminal empire into a legitimate business, while enemies on all sides tried to drag him back down. I've seen him make impossible choices, sacrifice personal safety, and risk everything to build something better. And I've seen this board sit in comfortable silence while he did it, taking profits but offering no support. Mara's voice strengthened. Damien Benedetti is in federal custody because Nico had the courage to expose him. Your company is safer, stronger, and cleaner than it's been in decades. If you can't see that as an asset, then perhaps you're the liability. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, surprisingly, Victoria Chen smiled. She's right, Victoria said, looking at Nico. We've been sitting on the fence, taking your money while questioning your methods. That's cowardice, not governance. I move that we formally support the CEO's restructuring initiatives and commit resources to the legitimization effort. Seconded, said another board member, a younger man Mara recognized as Daniel Reeves. Whitmore's expression darkened. You're making a mistake. Nico's father built this company on relationships that require... My father is dead, Nico interrupted, his voice flat and final. And his way of doing business died with him. I'm offering you a chance to be part of something better. If you can't accept that, then tender your resignation and walk away with your golden parachute. But don't sit in this room and lecture me about loyalty while undermining everything I'm trying to build. Whitmore stared at him, the challenge clear. For a moment, Mara thought he might actually resign, might storm out in indignant fury. Then his shoulders sagged, and he nodded slowly. Very well. I'll support the restructuring, but Nico, If this blows up in our faces, if federal investigators come knocking because of connections we can't explain, it's on you. Everything is always on me, Nico said quietly. That's what leadership means. The vote passed 9-3, and as the board members filed out, several stopped to shake Nico's hand, to murmur their support. Victoria Chen paused beside Mara. That took courage, she said, speaking truth to power. Most people in your position would have stayed silent. I'm not most people. Victoria's smile widened. No, you're certainly not. Keep him honest, Ms. Quinn. He needs someone who will. When they were finally alone, Nico pulled Mara into his arms, his forehead resting against hers. You didn't have to do that. Defend me in front of the board. Yes, I did. Because you would have been too diplomatic, too measured. Someone needed to tell them the truth without polish. They could have turned on you, demanded your resignation. Then I would have resigned and found another way to help you. Mara pulled back to look at him. I'm not going anywhere, Nico. Not because I'm trapped, not because I'm afraid, but because I choose to be here. With you, building this future together. His kiss was deep and desperate, a promise and a plea all at once. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, his eyes were bright with emotions he was finally allowing himself to feel. Marry me, he said. Mara's heart stopped. What? Marry me. Not because it's strategic, not because it helps the company, but because I can't imagine my life without you in it. Because you see me, really see me, and you haven't run. Because I love you more than I thought I was capable of loving anyone. He cupped her face with trembling hands. I know it's fast. I know we've barely had time to breathe between crises. But I also know that life is short and unpredictable, and I don't want to waste another second pretending I can do this without you. Tears blurred Mara's vision. A month ago, she'd been broke and desperate, begging for a job that would save her mother's life. Now she stood in a penthouse overlooking Manhattan, being proposed to by a man who'd become her entire world. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. Nico's laugh was shaky, relieved, joyous. He kissed her again, softer this time, reverent, and Mara felt something settle deep in her chest. This was real. This was happening. Against all odds, against every logical reason to run, they'd found each other and chosen to stay. The engagement announcement was kept private at first, shared only with close associates and family. Mara's mother cried when she heard the news, pulling Mara into a fierce hug that spoke of relief and worry and cautious happiness. Are you sure? Her mother asked when they were alone. Truly sure? This man's world is dangerous, sweetheart. I've watched you change these past weeks. You're stronger, yes, but also harder. I don't want you to lose yourself. I'm not losing myself, Mom. I'm finding who I was always meant to be. Mara took her mother's hands. Nico doesn't want me to be someone I'm not. He wants me exactly as I am, stubborn, impulsive, too brave for my own good. And I want him the same way, flawed and complicated and trying desperately to be better than his legacy. Her mother studied her face, and Mara saw the moment she truly understood. You love him. I love him, more than I thought possible. Then I'm happy for you. Terrified, but happy. Her mother smiled through tears. Your father would have liked him, I think. He always respected people who fought for what they believed in. The mention of her father, dead for 20 years, killed in circumstances Mara had never fully understood, sent a chill down her spine. Mom, what happened to Dad? You never wanted to talk about it, but I need to know. Was it connected to any of this? Her mother's expression shuddered. That's a conversation for another day, sweetheart. Today is about your future, not our past. But the question lingered in Mara's mind, an itch she couldn't quite scratch. That night, she found Nico in his office, surrounded by files and financial reports. Can I ask you something? She said, settling into the chair across from his desk. Anything. When we were at the docks, when Benedetti confronted us, he said something about your father knowing when to quit, like they had history. What was their relationship exactly? Nico's expression went carefully neutral. They were rivals, partners occasionally. They divided the city's underground operations between them. My father controlled the west side, Benedetti the east. It was an uneasy peace, but it held for nearly 20 years. Until your father died. Until my father died and Benedetti saw an opportunity to eliminate the competition. Nico set down his pen. Why are you asking? Because my mother mentioned my father today. He died 20 years ago, and she's never wanted to discuss the details. I always assumed it was an accident or illness, but now I'm wondering if there's more to it. Nico went very still. What was your father's name? Daniel Quinn. Why? For a long moment, Nico said nothing, his expression unreadable. Then he stood, crossed to a locked cabinet, and pulled out a file folder that looked decades old. He set it on the desk between them. Your father worked for mine, he said quietly. He was an accountant, brought in to help legitimize some of the Vallone family's holdings. According to these records, he died in a car accident in 2005, but there were always questions about whether it was really an accident. Mara's hand shook as she opened the file. Inside were police reports, newspaper clippings, and a photograph of a man she barely remembered. Her father, young and smiling, standing beside a silver-haired man she recognized from old photos as Nico's father. What kind of questions? She whispered. The kind that suggested he'd discovered something he wasn't supposed to know. Financial irregularities that connected back to Benedetti's operations. Your father was going to expose it, to turn everything over to federal investigators. Nico's voice was gentle. He died before he could. The room tilted. Mara gripped the edge of the desk, her mind racing through implications she wasn't ready to face. Are you telling me Benedetti killed my father? I'm telling you it's possible, even likely, but I don't have proof. My father's records from that time are incomplete, and anyone who might have known the truth is either dead or too terrified to talk. Rage and grief warred in Mara's chest. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because I didn't know your connection until just now. Quinn is a common name, and you never mentioned your father worked in finance. Nico came around the desk, kneeling in front of her chair. Mara, I'm sorry. If I'd known, if I'd realized, you would have what? Protected me from the truth? Mara's voice broke. My entire life, I've been told my father died in an accident, a random tragedy. But it wasn't random, was it? He died because he tried to do the right thing, because he tried to expose criminals like Benedetti. Yes, the single word hung between them, heavy with terrible certainty. Mara felt tears slip down her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. Instead, she pulled out her phone and made a call. Who are you calling? Nico asked. The federal prosecutor handling Benedetti's case. If he killed my father, if he's responsible for 20 years of my mother's grief and my growing up without a dad, then I want him to pay for all of it. Not just the recent crimes. Everything. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Sarah Chen, listened to Mara's story with growing interest. If we can prove Benedetti was involved in your father's death, it opens up additional charges. But we'd need evidence. Witnesses, something concrete. Then we'll find it, Mara said, her voice steady with determination. Whatever it takes. The investigation into her father's death took 3 weeks and uncovered a trail of corruption that stunned even seasoned federal agents. Bank records showing payments from Benedetti's shell companies to a mechanic who'd worked on Daniel Quinn's car. Testimony from a former associate who'd been present when Benedetti ordered the hit. And buried deep in the Vallone family archives, a ledger in Nico's father's handwriting documenting the kill order and his refusal to participate. It was enough. More than enough. Damien Benedetti was charged with first-degree murder in addition to his existing crimes. The news broke on a cold February morning, and Mara stood in the prosecutor's office watching as Sarah Chen outlined the case to a room full of reporters. 20 years ago, Daniel Quinn was murdered for trying to expose criminal activity. Today, we're ensuring that his killer finally faces justice. This case represents everything our office stands for, the belief that no one is above the law, that truth will eventually come to light, and that victims and their families deserve closure. Mara's mother was beside her, tears streaming down her face, her hand clasped tightly in Mara's. Your father would be so proud, she whispered. So proud of the woman you've become. I wish he could be here to see it. He is, sweetheart. In you, in your courage, in your refusal to let criminals win. Her mother squeezed her hand. You gave him justice. That's everything. The trial was set for later that year, but the evidence was overwhelming. Benedetti's lawyers tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecution held firm. This was going to trial, and the full scope of Benedetti's crimes would be exposed for the world to see. In the months that followed, Vallone Holdings underwent a transformation that bordered on miraculous. Nico systematically dismantled the shadow operations his father had built, converting assets into legitimate investments, severing ties with questionable associates, and building partnerships with companies that operated entirely in daylight. It was painful, expensive, and absolutely necessary. Mara worked beside him every step of the way, her official title upgraded to Executive Vice President of Strategic Operations. She brought fresh perspective to problems that had plagued the company for decades, found creative solutions to impossible challenges, and earned the respect of people who'd initially dismissed her as Nico's trophy. Together, they rebuilt Vallone Holdings into something neither of Nico's parents would recognize. A company that didn't just survive scrutiny, but welcomed it, that operated with transparency and integrity, that proved you could be successful without sacrificing your soul. The wedding was planned for late June, a garden ceremony at a historic estate in the Hudson Valley. Mara wanted something intimate, meaningful, far removed from the violence and fear that had dominated their early relationship. Nico wanted whatever made her happy, which meant he sat through cake tastings and floral arrangements with patient good humor. You know, we could just elope, he said one evening, surrounded by invitation samples. Vegas Chapel, Elvis impersonator, done in 20 minutes. Mara laughed, leaning into him. And deny your board members the chance to see you in a tux, publicly committing to domesticity? They'd never forgive me. True. Whitmore specifically told me that watching me get married might restore his faith in miracles. See? Public service. The night before the wedding, Mara found herself unable to sleep. She stood in the guest room of the estate, looking out at the gardens that would host tomorrow's ceremony, her mind spinning with memories of the past 6 months. From desperate job applicant to partner in a criminal investigation to executive vice president to bride. It felt impossible, implausible, utterly real. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find her mother standing in the hallway, wearing a robe and a gentle smile. Couldn't sleep either? Her mother asked. Too much to think about. May I come in? They sat together on the window seat, looking out at the moonlit gardens. For a while, neither spoke, comfortable in the shared silence. Then her mother reached over and took her hand. I need to tell you something, her mother said softly, about your father, about the night he died. Mara's breath caught. Mom, you don't have to. I do. Because tomorrow you're starting a new chapter, and you deserve to know the whole story. Her mother's eyes were distant, remembering. Your father knew he was in danger. He knew that what he discovered could get him killed. But he also knew that staying silent would make him complicit in terrible things. So he made a choice. He chose to do the right thing, even knowing what it might cost. Tears burned behind Mara's eyes. Did he know about me? That you were pregnant? Yes. He knew. And he still made the choice because he wanted you to grow up in a world where people stood up for what was right, consequences be damned. Her mother smiled through tears. You're so much like him, sweetheart. That same fierce courage, that same refusal to look away from injustice. When I watch you with Nico, when I see you building something better out of darkness and violence, I see your father's legacy living on. I wish he could have met Nico. He would have liked him. Your father always respected people who were trying to atone, trying to be better than their worst choices. Her mother squeezed her hand. You found a good man, Mara. A complicated, difficult, wonderfully imperfect good man. I'm happy for you. They held each other as the moon crossed the sky. 2 generations of Quinn women who'd loved fiercely and survived impossibly and refused to let violence define their stories. The wedding day dawned bright and perfect, the June sunshine warm on Mara's shoulders as she stood in the bridal suite, surrounded by the few people who'd helped her through the chaos of the past months. Her mother fussed with her veil. Victoria Chen, who'd become an unexpected friend and mentor, handed her the bouquet. And Silas, looking uncomfortable in formal wear, but oddly emotional, stood guard at the door. He's a wreck,
Silas reported. I've never seen the boss nervous, but he's currently pacing like a caged tiger and sweating through his shirt. Mara laughed, the sound surprised and delighted. Good. He should be nervous. This is terrifying. Cold feet, warm feet, hot feet. Feet that are absolutely certain this is right, but also aware that we're promising forever in front of everyone we know. She smoothed down the simple lace dress she'd chosen, elegant and understated. But I'm ready, is he? He's been ready since the moment you walked into his office 23 minutes late and told him the truth. Silas's expression softened. You changed him, you know. Made him believe he could be more than his father's son. That's not a small thing. He changed me too. Made me believe I could be more than my circumstances. The ceremony was exactly what Mara had hoped for. Small, intimate, surrounded by people who'd earned their place through loyalty and love rather than obligation. The garden was decorated with white flowers and soft lights, and as Mara walked down the aisle on her mother's arm, she saw Nico waiting at the altar, his expression a mixture of awe and fierce joy that made her heart stutter. The officiant, a kind-faced woman they'd chosen specifically for her lack of religious rhetoric, began the ceremony with simple grace. We gather today to witness the union of two people who found each other in darkness and chose to build something better in light. Mara and Nico, you've already faced trials that would break most couples. You've survived danger, overcome enemies, and proven that love can exist even in the most unlikely circumstances. Today, you're choosing to make that love official, to commit to each other not just in crisis but in peace, not just in survival but in joy. Mara and Nico had written their own vows, and when it came time to speak them, Nico's voice was steady despite the emotion in his eyes. Mara, you walked into my life when I'd forgotten what it meant to hope. You looked at me, really looked at me, and saw not the Valone name, not the violence I'd inherited, but the man I was trying to become. You challenged me, pushed me, refused to let me hide behind walls and distance. You made me believe that I could build something better, not just for myself but for us. I promise to honor that belief every day, to be worthy of your trust, your courage, your love, to build a future with you that honors both our pasts and transcends them. I love you, Mara Quinn. I'll love you until my last breath and beyond. Mara's own vows came through tears, but her voice was strong. Nico, I came to you desperate and out of options, and you gave me a chance when you had every reason not to. You saw potential in me that I'd forgotten existed. You taught me that strength isn't about being invulnerable. It's about being willing to stand up and fight even when you're terrified. You gave me my mother's life back, and in return, I want to give you everything I am. My loyalty, my partnership, my whole heart. I promise to stand beside you as you build something better. To challenge you when you need it, support you always, and love you with the same fierce determination you've shown me. Whatever comes next, we face it together. The officiant smiled. By the power vested in me by the state of New York, I now pronounce you married. You may kiss each other. Nico's kiss was tender and passionate all at once, a promise sealed in front of witnesses. And when they broke apart, the small crowd erupted in applause. Mara laughed through happy tears, holding tight to her husband's hand as they walked back down the aisle together, starting their new life with every step. The reception was held in the estate's ballroom, an elegant affair that somehow managed to feel warm and personal despite the formal setting. Mara danced with Nico, with her mother, with Silas, who grumbled but secretly seemed pleased. Victoria Chen cornered her at one point with champagne and sage advice about navigating corporate politics as a woman married to the CEO. They'll question your competence, suggest you only got your position through nepotism, try to undermine you at every turn, Victoria said bluntly. Don't let them. You earned your place through intelligence and courage. Make sure they never forget that. I won't, Mara promised. As the evening wore on and guests began to drift toward their cars, Nico pulled Mara aside to a quiet terrace overlooking the gardens. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, and for a moment they just stood together, breathing in the peace. We did it, Nico said softly. Against all odds, against every logical reason to fail, we actually did it. We survived, Mara agreed. We rebuilt. We chose each other. And now? Nico turned to face her, his hands framing her face with infinite gentleness. What comes next? Mara thought about the question, about Vallone Holdings, now a beacon of ethical business practices, about Benedetti awaiting trial in a federal prison, about her father's vindication and her mother's healing and the future that stretched before them, bright and unwritten. Now we live, she said simply. We build the company into something that makes us proud. We support each other through whatever challenges come. We maybe expand our family when we're ready. We prove that people can change, that love can triumph over violence, that hope is stronger than fear. That's a pretty ambitious agenda. You married an ambitious woman. Nico's laugh was warm, genuine, the sound of a man who'd finally found peace. I did. Best decision I ever made. They kissed as the sun set, two people who'd found each other in the darkest circumstances and chosen to build something radiant. The past 6 months had tested them in ways neither could have anticipated. They'd faced violence, betrayal, impossible choices, and enemies who wanted them destroyed. But they'd survived. More than survived. They'd thrived. And as they stood together on that terrace, looking out at a future they'd fought so hard to claim, Mara felt a certainty settle deep in her bones. This was just the beginning. Whatever challenges came next, whatever obstacles they faced, they'd handle it the same way they'd handled everything else. Together. Fearlessly. With love as their foundation and hope as their compass. The story that had started with a desperate woman 23 minutes late to an interview had become something neither of them could have predicted. A love story, yes, but also a redemption arc. A transformation. A testament to the power of choosing courage over comfort, truth over convenience, and love over fear. Somewhere in Manhattan, Vallone Holdings stood as a monument to that choice. A company reborn, its dark legacy transformed into something that could stand in daylight without shame. Somewhere in a federal prison, Damien Benedetti awaited justice for crimes spanning decades, including the murder of a good man who'd tried to do the right thing. Somewhere in Westchester, Mara's mother slept peacefully, free from the medical debt that had once crushed her, finally at peace with her husband's memory and her daughter's future. And here, in this moment, on this terrace, Mara and Nico Vallone held each other and dreamed of the future they'd build together. A future earned through sacrifice and courage. A future worth every impossible choice they'd made to get here. As the last light faded from the sky and stars began to emerge, Nico whispered against her hair, "Thank you." For what? For being 23 minutes late. For telling me the truth. For staying when anyone sane would have run. For loving me despite everything. His arms tightened around her. For giving me a reason to be better. Mara smiled, her heart so full it hurt. You gave me the same thing. We gave it to each other. And that really was the heart of their story. Not that a powerful man had saved a desperate woman, or that a clever woman had redeemed a dangerous man, but that two people, flawed and complicated and impossibly brave, had found each other in the chaos and decided to build something beautiful from the wreckage. They stayed on that terrace until the stars filled the sky, talking about dreams and plans and the 1,000 small moments that make up a life. And when they finally went inside, it was hand in hand, partners in every sense of the word, ready to face whatever came next. Together. Always together. The end of one chapter and the beginning of everything else.